pledge allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, and liberty and justice for all. What are the February 24th meeting of the Town of Rochester Planning Board? This is Courtney. Didn't have a name check for her, sorry. She's sitting in for Jasmine. So if you would call the roll call and just mark them as present or not.
Chair Jones,
Here,
Member Nelson,
here.
Member Pinsky,
He's out with the excuse.
Member Duda,
Here.
Member Roberts,
Yeah.
Member Barnwell. Here. Oh, I'm sorry. Your last name.
Here.
Okay.
Oh, it's Petcherin.
Okay.
It's hopeless.
And alternate.
Yeah.
Also in attendance is Dave Jordan,
Here.
Dave Church,
Here.
Greg Boland,
He's not here.
Greg. Mr. Moore.
Oh, that's his assistant. He's not here. Okay. All right, just a quick announcement. I've just asked the board to be, we should be, myself included, be careful. The YouTube is going all the time, so if we break and we have, a break of some sort, 5 minutes, 10 minutes, or at the end of the meeting, let's just be careful. What we say, that we don't say anything, not so much untoward, but about a project or something, right? So let's just watch our P's and Q's, because we are being recorded. Okay, I'm gonna switch the agenda a little bit because Bill, you're here for both Sutherland and Roebuck. So I'm gonna do Danford first. Okay. Matt Town, and then we'll do both of yours, Bill. Yeah, that's fine. Okay. So Matt, you want to join us? You have it, Danford, it's in the Google Drive under Danford. There's a separate subfolder called Danford. And we had this, we were going to do it last time, the last meeting, but I couldn't because we hadn't yet gotten information from our engineer regarding the SWIP. And we got that in the interim, and Greg Bowler, our engineer, said the SWIP is fine. He has no comments. It's perfect. So we had closed the public hearing at the last meeting, and so it's now this decision time. So I'm going to rattle through this. There's some things I'm going to skip. If anybody has a question about anything I skip, please feel free to ask me. But I'm going to skip the whole first page, except to say it's the Danford subdivision. It's been here in front of us for almost 7 months in one either or another. And it's a 4-lot subdivision on Upper Whitfield Road. I'm switching to the next page, page 2. You'll see there a list of all the documents that were presented to the board for the project. Next section is a notice of public hearing. When we declared that we would hold a public hearing, or when it was open rather, and then when it was closed on January 13th. And then the findings. So I'm going to quickly go through the findings. And finding number 1, the planning board received the zoning permit determination and referral from the CEO dated April 29th of 24 for a minor 4-lot subdivision from the owner, William Danford. The latter granted permission to be represented by Matt Town, PC of Willingham Engineering. 2, parcel is approximately 72¼ acres, and it's in the AR3 zoning district. The original application was laid out as if it were a conservation subdivision with small lots as permitted. Subsequent discussions ensued, and it was represented as a traditional subdivision of 4 lots. 3, the applicant has met with the planning board numerous times to discuss various items. A detailed initial review was conducted by the town planner, submitted on November 8th, 2024. Planning board declared itself lead agency. It determined this action to be unlisted and uncoordinated on 12/9/24 under seeker. It was further determined that it is not necessary to refer to the Ulster County Planning Board. EAF Part 2 was done, and the board made a negative declaration of significance. SHPO commentary was received. It recommended that the historic house on the property be shielded from the newer homes that were being built. This was already accomplished on the plat plan since the existing forest barrier and shielding is to remain. 6, highway commentary of 1028 indicated no site obstruction and the driveways as planned meet the town code. 7, fire commentary of 1028-24 indicated that the roads on the map appear to meet fire code and will be inspected at the time of construction. 8, adjustments were made that limited the number of drives onto Upper Whitfield Road. There is now a shared driveway for 3 homes, including the existing one and a single driveway for the remaining existing one and 2 others, and then a single driveway for the remaining 4th house in the development. Improvements to both egresses onto Upper Whitfield include paving to avoid debris flow and washouts onto the town road. 9, there were 2 public comments regarding the project. 1, concerning the presence of other wetlands not shown on the map. Applicant satisfied the board that the wetland delineation done by both the surveyor and confirmed by the DEC are correct, and a wetland map is provided as part of the record. The second comment was a letter concern with a residence view shed from a house across Upper Whitfield, across from the project. Applicant agreed to move the houses to a lower elevation to assuage any concern. 10, conservation area signs that will be provided every 100 feet. The depiction of said sign is part of the map set. 11, basic SWIP information was submitted, reviewed, and approved by our engineering firm. All pertinent conditions required as per town code have been met by the applicant. Findings were prepared by the chairman and/or town planner, were read and discussed as needed by the planning board in the public meeting at the time and place of adoption. Now resolved, the town of Rochester Planning Board hereby grants minor subdivision final approval permitting the subdivision of lands situated at 120 Upper Whitfield Road in the town of Rochester pursuant to a proposed plat dated. Matt, what was the last plat dated? Do you remember? Was that one? I might have my answer here. 127?
Yeah, probably that's later than the one I got pulled in. I'll have to double check. But I
Okay.
think it's,
All right, we'll come back to that. Subject to these general and specific conditions of approval. And by the way, the format for this, for doing these is continuing to evolve. So in the past, we voted on the findings and this time we're not, and we won't in the future. It was recommended by our attorney. We didn't need to do that.
Well, to be clear, if anybody objects to the findings, you can tell Rick now, we can change it, but the conditions are also quite important. We should look very carefully at those. If anybody objects to anything, we can change it. Otherwise, you're voting on one resolution.
Instead of doing it twice, we were voting twice, once on findings, once on conditions.
Right.
And so general conditions, and you'll see these for the most part in every decision that we do, there'll be general conditions. And they'll be pretty much the same standard verbiage. 1, all fees due to the town of Rochester involving this application shall be paid in full prior to the chair's signature on the final plan. 2, final subdivision map for signature will be sure to show the address of the property and property owners. Change the title to final subdivision plat with the final plat date. Show the various dates of different versions of the map. There are 2 signature blocks, one for the planning board chair's signature and the second an owner's consent block that is signed and dated by the owners following the date of last revision of the final map and prior to the chair signing the plat. 3, the final subdivision plat is approved by the planning board shall be binding upon the applicant and any subsequent owner. Any changes from the approved plan shall require resubmission and reapproval by the planning board. No deviation from the plans, reports, or other documents that form the basis for this approval are effective unless and until an amendment to this resolution is secured from the planning board in writing. The town may stop work on this project and or revoke a building permit and or withhold a certificate of occupancy and or seek any other additional relief as authorized by law if any term or condition of this resolution is violated. 4, all other required local, county, state, or federal permits shall be secured for the current and future use of these lands. And then the specific conditions of approval. 1, a copy of the septic approval delivered before the signing of the map. 2, shared driveway must have an RMA satisfactory to the planning board. and approved by the town board, town's attorney before the maps are signed by the chairman. 3, all surveyors and engineers' notes on final map submitted must be followed in the field. 4, shared driveway must have an apron of macadam, cement or brick from 20 to 30 feet in length to ensure that gravel does not wash out onto Upper Woodfield, and so vehicles from the development do not skid out onto the roadway in snowy or icy conditions. Width of shared driveway must meet fire code and be approved in the field by the fire code inspector of the town of Rochester. The siding of the homes must be shown, siding of the homes must be as shown on the map. 6, the conservation area must be denoted as such with the appropriate signs as per map S3 notes that are part of the final map set. They shall be spaced 100 feet apart. No clearing of any trees shown on the map as part of the area delineated by the tree line. The applicant shall present a final subdivision plat for signature. The following plat notes shall be included on the recorded final plat map prepared for the chair's signature. 1, any further subdivisions of the land shall only occur with the approval of the town of Rochester Planning Board. 2, floodplain. This property contains lands within the 100-year floodplain as determined by FEMA. Any construction or disturbance on this property within the FEMA designated 100-year floodplain shall adhere to the town of Rochester, code of the town of Rochester, chapter 81, flood damage prevention, and apply to all owners and their successors. 3, town of Rochester waterway, as per the code of the town of Rochester, section 140-12E, each lot fronting on a named stream depicted on the USGS survey maps shall include a setback of 100 feet in depth from the high water mark of such stream. No principal structure shall be located within such setback. The planning board shall, however, be authorized to modify this requirement where necessary, or to accommodate reasonable use of properties outside the floodplain, provided other mitigating measures such as deed covenants, limiting clearing near the stream are employed to protect stream quality. 4, right to farm. This property may border a farm as defined in chapter 75 of the town of Rochester Code. Residents should be aware that farmers have the right to undertake farm practices, which may generate dust, odor, smoke, noise, and vibrations, and which may involve insecticides, herbicides, pesticides, etc. 9, all conditions of approval, number 3 through 8 for this project shall be recorded on the final map before the signing of the map by the chair. The town of Rochester Planning Board further grants authority to the chairman to certify that these conditions have been met, at which time the chairman is authorized to sign and date the plat without further resolution by the planning board. This final subdivision approval shall expire 180 days from this approval date unless the final plat is presented and signed by the chairman. This period may be extended for 2 additional 90-day periods upon application to and approval by the town of Rochester Planning Board. Before I go on, Matt, we're still waiting for the RMA for this, correct? Okay, that was mine. All right, so you know about that.
Yep.
Effective.
Did we send you a sample?
You did, thank you very much.
Okay. Effective approval, 1, the owner shall file in the office of the Ulster County Clerk such approved plat bearing the chairman's signature and any other related documents within 62 days from the date of the chairman's signature, or such approval shall be deemed to expire without further notice in accordance with New York State Town Law, section 276. 2, the owner shall have the responsibility to return 5 Ulster County Clerk certified copies of this filed plat and any other related documents to the town of Rochester Planning Board within 30 days of such filing. Draft resolution was prepared by the chairman and or town planner, was read and discussed as needed by the planning board in a public meeting at the time and place of adoption. So anybody have any, well, wait, first a motion made to approve the decision, and then we'll see if there's any comments. So I have a motion. Peter will make the motion.
I second.
Alina will second it. Any discussion, any questions? Okay, all in favor of the decision as written? Anybody opposed? Anybody abstaining? So we have 6 approved, no nays, and 1 absent. Okay, so Matt, it's approved. You know what you have to do. Do you have the date of the, for the map? Or the
I'll
final map?
email you tomorrow.
Okay, all right, so, give me a shout when you're ready to bring the RMA in. All right, and, we'll go from there.
Great, thank you very much.
We're done.
Well,
Thanks. Thank you for hanging in.
Matt, are you a PC?
Yeah, that's supposed, I'm not very politically correct most of the time, so.
You PC? You have a new resolution.
It's
Professional
It's a
corporation.
PE is what I.
Oh.
PE, it's corporation might be PC.
Okay,
Sometimes, but there are, people can do that.
politically correct.
Well, yeah, but it's all, usually it's professional corporation.
All right, so
Willingham might be PC.
all right. Okay, the next one, Bill, where are you? Pick up the Legos. Okay, this one takes a little bit of explaining. And so Sutherland was on the agenda many months ago. It actually went through public hearing back on in August sometime, I believe. Public hearing was actually closed. But subsequent to that, board had made some requirements or requests, 3 in particular, one having to do with traffic, another having to do with drainage, and another one based upon, and they were all based upon public comment, and another one based upon what sounded like inadequate electricity being applied or supplied to this road. And the road is Stony Kill Road. So Bill was asked to go back and do some more work to come back with some answers to those 3 concerns. He did. It took some time. I can assure the board that all 3 have been addressed. Letters from Bill, from Greg Bolner, as well as from a certified professional electrician, a master electrician, about the adequacy of electricity on Stony Hill Road. It's fine. And so we're at the point where all of the extra things that were asked of Bill, they were done. So we're at the point of, and in fact, that night, there was an approval ready to be read, but it was put aside because of these additional 3 things. So the approval is in the Google Drive. There may be, I think, in your package, there might be a copy of the approval. Is there a copy of the approval in
Yes.
the package? Yes, okay. And you'll see that this format is different from the format of the one I just read in Danford. There's a lot of whereases and wherefores and that sort of stuff. So, as I said, this was written back in August, September, when there was a different approach to doing these. So I'm going to, Bill, do you have any comments?
Just a minor thing, I don't want to make any, I don't raise any trouble here, but, just on the list of, documents that were, and materials reviewed, I'm not sure, the last one, number 8, about the shared driveway, I don't even know what that, is. I don't see that I have any document about that. I don't think that I had any memos regarding the shared driveway, so I don't know what that is. But then the other things that I thought should be noted were the submissions that we did make. One was the letter from our engineering staff regarding feasibility for septic on the larger lot, which was submitted. And that was dated way back in August 27th, 24. Oh no, that was even further back than that. Site evaluation, August 14th, 24. And then on August 27th, we submitted a little detail map with the drainage analysis.
Right.
And that was referred to CPL. And then you have a letter from Greg Bolner from CPL, basically reviewing those 3 issues you brought up and stating that they had been satisfied. So I just like probably should just list that particularly in the list of documentation.
Yeah, thank you.
That letter in response there.
I just picked up the old decision that
Oh, yeah,
we hadn't
Right,
yet done,
didn't have any of
those, so
those
you're
things yet.
absolutely right.
Yep.
I'll include those.
okay,
And so part of the resolution will be the board permitting, approving it with the assumption that these things will be added post meeting, when we get there. So anything else?
no,
Anybody on the board have questions about why this took so long? We aim
It's a long
to,
discussion.
it's a different discussion, we need to move faster if we can. All right, so I'm gonna skip all of the preliminary information up here, except to state that it's a minor subdivision, a 3-lot subdivision. Which includes 2 new lots and 1 existing lot with a dwelling on it. And then I'm jumping down to the bottom. Can I skip all the whereases?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Page 2, we're gonna skip all.
I would like to read really only the special conditions because everything else is kind of boilerplate. And anybody on the board who's read it can make any objections they want, but if you want to move it along, I would just read the
Okay.
special conditions.
So we're gonna skip all the whereases and we're gonna go to page 2, and actually, there were no specific conditions. Again, there was these were done a little bit differently this last year. Normally there'd be findings and there'd be some specific conditions, but so I'm gonna start with general conditions of approval. And number 1 has to do with the fees. You know what? I'm not gonna read it. It's exactly the same as what we did before.
Promotion.
Thank you. You all might have had a chance to read it. Anybody have any questions or comments? Okay, so it's fairly standard. Everything's been done. I can certify to that. So it asks for a motion to approve the Sutherland project with the caveat that I will make changes as per Bill's comments to the documents that were presented to the file. So I will ask for a motion. Hans?
We had to give it to you, Hans. I mean,
Thank you
just
so much. It's such a glory.
Second from this side,
I'll say.
David. Seconds. All in favor?
Aye.
Anybody opposed? And one absentee, so 6 ayes, no nays, and 1 absence. Okay, thank you all. So Bill, that one's done. It was long and arduous. Thank you for hanging in there. Okay. Roebuck. Basically, there's no good way to start with this one, except to say I do have a decision. But before we do the decision, the public hearing is still open. And so if there's anybody here who wishes to speak about this project, since the public hearing is still open, I'll ask if anybody has any comments about the Roebuck project. It's on Route 209. It's an addition of a single-family home to an existing commercial operation. Okay. I'm going to leave it open for a second because I want to bring something to the board's attention, which sort of not confused, but adds a little bit of a few warts to this. We typed this. I typed it. First of all, our planner didn't do a review of this at the time that this came in. We weren't having the planner do reviews to everything. It was only where there were bigger projects. Now I have them doing a review no matter the size of the project, just so we're on the straight and narrow. It could range from a half hour's worth of work to the larger ones where it's a couple of hours worth of work. So this didn't get a planner review. As a result, I made a mistake in the typing of this project. I typed it as unlisted. When you type something as unlisted and uncoordinated, which is the way we typed it, you need to do an EAF. Subsequently, after typing it as unlisted, there was some communication from the applicants, from Barry Menenbeck of the same firm that Bill works for, that they submitted this and suggested it was a type 2. I went to Dave and said, is this unlisted a type 2? And Dave agreed it was a type 2. Which means you don't have to do secret. you gotta pass. I never came back to this board during all the discussions, just slipped through the cracks to ask that we re-vote on this to make it unbecome and unlisted, but to be a type 2. Hold that thought. And we need to do that before we go too much further. At the same time, I had a question about what was submitted to the county. And our records were, at the time, not precise as to what was submitted. So a letter went from me up to the county, and it caused them, at some point, it caused them to say, we don't have any comments. It's an exception. It doesn't have to be reviewed by Ulster County. For whatever reason, they reconsidered that. I wasn't aware of it until I got a letter from them on February 5th. It's in your file. Under referrals, I think it's in the subfolder called referrals. It's dated February 5th, and lo and behold, it's commentary from Ulster County Planning Board. When I called the folks up there, I said, you told me there was no comment, and now there's comment. They said, well, principally because we didn't realize that you hadn't done an EAF. And I said, oh, bleep. It was, I didn't do the EAF. They were looking for the, it was unlisted incorrectly. They were looking for the EAF. And they said, one of their comments is, where's the EAF? Okay, so we can deal with that. But they also took the opportunity to make some other comments. And in no particular order of importance. They made the comment. And by the way, I won't say we're stuck, but they made the comment, we can't unmake what they've commented on. Even though previously they told us they weren't going to comment. I guess we could appeal to them. That certainly this board could say we want to appeal it and we don't want to, we just want to throw away these comments, but let me go through the comments and the board can decide what they, and I have a recommendation, but they can decide what we want to do. They required, and so there's two kinds of comments from the county. One is required, one is recommended. You can not act on the recommended, I'll call it ignore the recommended, and not have to go back to them except to say, we're not following it. When it's required, you have to give them a reason why, if you decide not to do it. Go ahead. That's why.
There are two types of comments, and I'm not sure if people have this document, but basically there's recommendations and there's required modifications. Recommendations are just advice. They have wisdom up there. We can take their wisdom or not. Required modifications under General Municipal Law 239M have a very specific legal role. First of all, of course, it's advice as well, and we can take it for what it's worth. But secondly, if we decide not to take their advice for a required modification, that requires a supermajority to approve the resolution just in spite of the required modification. So they tell us to do A, B, and C, and we pass a resolution of approval that doesn't include A, B, and C. That resolution has to pass with 5 votes. That's basic. That functionally gives the planning board, the county planning board, 1 vote on our approvals. So, not all of them, but any approval subject to referral. So the point here is that we have 4 required modifications, and they're a little bit quirky, which we can, if we want to spend some time on it, we can discuss sort of how they fit. And that's what Rick was sort of alluding to. But the bottom line is we have 4 required modifications. And if we want to pass the approval over without complying with all 4, we're going to need 5 votes.
Okay.
Beyond that, I'm happy to answer any questions.
Is this indeed a type 2 action?
It is a type 2 action, and the reason is because all that they're doing, in general, of course, a site plan is not going to be a type 2 action, and a site plan Route 209 is going to require referral to the county. But in this case, all they're doing is building a house,
Right.
and under the type 2 list, building a house is a type 2. Dave, is that the one? Is that the correct category?
Construction or expansion of a single family or 2-family or 3-family residence on an approved lot.
In English,
So
building a
then-
house,
So it is a type 2.
right?
Would it have still been referred to Ulster County if we had typed it correctly? first
The
time?
typing, the typing
It's
does
still-
not involve.
No, it's not.
Right,
county.
it gets referred to the county because it's a site plan on Route 209, unless I'm
Okay,
missing
thank you.
something.
That was my question. So they would have had the opportunity to comment regardless.
Yes, but that even doesn't matter. The fact is they have comment.
Okay.
Now, the question, and also, and the question, to go to your point, the question is whether those comments are under law, and the answer is yes.
Yes, okay,
They
So
initially
legal, they've
declined,
commented,
thank you.
they initially declined to comment.
Yes.
because it's a house, but they then went back and rethought it, and we've got
And-
more comments.
In writing, right? Rick?
Yeah, and right.
Oh, yeah, we've got a
Yeah.
referral.
They rethought it. Maybe because it not only was it a house, it was a good sized garage. But in any case. So the first required modification, and you can read it there if you have it up, a landscaping plan. So landscaping plan, and they're pretty specific as to what that means. It's not just put some plants there. It's an actual plan, a plan, which would show the area on 209 and show specific plantings. We've seen these before. Accord Social came back to us with a detailed landscape plan. So you're familiar with that means. So that's what they're looking for. They want to know that the number and type of plants they're going to be put in there, whether they're trees, whether they're perennials, grasses, whatever they may be. And the whole purpose of it is to shield the property, the applicant's property, from 209 and to beautify it, to make it look better. So that's the first one. And as I said, they're pretty specific on what they want to see in the landscape plan. Drainage, greater than an acre of disturbance has occurred. I challenge that, but I don't know what they based it on, but okay. Stormwater drainage, especially towards the rear of the property, is of concern, and I would agree. That's why there was a drainage easement that was supposed to be on the map. We did get it on the latest map. You have the latest copy of the Roebuck plan in front of you that was submitted by Medenbach and Eggers. And it should have the drainage easement on there. I think that's the latest plan. Is there a drainage easement on that?
Yes.
Okay, so the drainage easement was a drainage easement that was originally on the original plan going back to 1993. It didn't get presented to us in any of the other plans during the course of us reviewing it for one reason or another. It was picked up, if you remember, at the public hearing of a month and a half ago. Gentleman came in and said, there's a drainage easement, and he went through a whole thing. How do you wind up getting rid of a drainage easement that should be there, yada, yada, yada. And so we challenged him, okay, but show us evidence of a drainage easement. Well, he came, and it was in the deed as well, right? He came back to us with the drainage easement. And so I presented that to the applicant surveyor, engineer, and so that's why you see the drainage easement there. So in my mind, yeah, that drainage easement was done at the time that project in the back, Queens Village, I think it's called Queens Village 2 project was built, Hamilton Drive. Peter, is that the name of
Yeah.
it back there, Hamilton Drive? There were drainage concerns, and so that drainage easement was put in place. As I come to find out, the drainage easement was actually at one time was a ditch, a fairly good sized ditch that went across the property. And the water just naturally drained from the back from Hamilton Drive, went across the property and wound up in a culvert that went under 209 and went to the other side of 209. Over time, the various owners of the property filled in the ditch, but the drainage easement still is there. So if at some point in time there was a need for some sort of drainage appurtenance, like a pipe, it would have to be dug up and the pipe put in. It's my belief that the town, from reading the document, the town has the easement, so the easement is now there. So as far as I'm concerned, the concern with drainage is fine, in my mind, that there is a way that it can be drained if there's a problem. All these years from 1993, when the drainage easement was placed on the map, there has been no attempt to put in any kind of piping. That tells me, okay, there might be some problems, but not significant enough to cause somebody to exercise that easement and to put in the pipe. My only concern when I found this out was, where's the house relative to the drainage easement? You can't have a house sitting on top of a drainage easement. If you look at the map, the septic line not the system, but the septic line goes across the drainage easement. So if the easement was ever exercised, they'd have to go through, under, whatever, the septic line, and then the septic line would have to be restored. That's the only way that I can see. I don't know whether Bill looked at other ways. It's the only way, that corner is the only way to get a septic system in for the house. And so the line has to go across the drainage easement. And Bill, you can comment if you want, whether,
So I don't think that's a problem. There's a lot of places where there's various utilities crisscrossing at multiple depths and levels.
so that would have to be dealt with if the drainage was ever exercised. So in my mind, drainage, while it might occur to be a problem, it can be dealt with by whoever's gonna deal with it. It's not the applicant's responsibility to deal with that drainage problem. It would be, now that the town has the drainage easement, they have to deal with it. The secret determination goes away because we're gonna retype it as a type 2. So the comment is accurate, it's just we never corrected on my error. And then the health department, we do have the paperwork from the health department. Bill, that's true, right?
Not familiar with that, actually. You do.
You gave it to us about a month ago.
Yeah,
Actually, it was
we-
We
when I
have,
first applied for the
okay,
permit.
so we have it in the
The
file.
permits in the Dropbox.
So, 3 of the 4 items in my mind are taken care of. We still have to,
If I may,
yeah, go ahead, Dick.
the way we talked about the decision was. The county required modification called for a SWIP. So I would argue you would have to override that. Because you're not requiring the applicant
To do a
to
SWIP,
do a SWIP.
yes.
And to elaborate, the revised site plan's got roof drains and a swale now added to it for drainage as well. So
That's
there's,
correct, yeah.
so there's additional features. So the one issue of the first 3 or 4 you talked about is, are you gonna waive a SWIP requirement?
Well, it says a determination, it is also recommended a determination as to whether a SWIP will be necessary to be made.
Yeah,
So it doesn't stipulate a SWIP is required.
It doesn't say a SWIP is required, they just want us to.
determine if one is.
And in my mind,
It's the same thing.
it's the same thing as saying, look, if there was a problem, it would have erupted already. If there's a problem in the back, they would have exercised the easement. The owner of the easement. So as part of the supermajority vote, if that's where we go with it. It would specifically say, no, we don't need this SWIP. So the only question I have for the board,
Our argument is you just have to determine.
Yes, my
Yeah.
argument is we determine
The-
whether it's needed. And if we determine it's not.
The issue is it's having done thousands of these in my prior job. As a county planner, it's poorly written, their response. I just recommend you make a decision about the SWIP.
by resolution,
And it's in the resolution that it's not gonna be necessary.
okay. So you put it in the decision,
Well, it's in the special condition number 1 that, as you said, the work seeker and health department are met. Drainage is met, except you make a finding that the SWIP isn't necessary,
okay.
which is still up for discussion.
Yes.
So the only, perhaps the one thing that the board may want or require is the landscape plan, question mark.
I have a question about that.
Go ahead.
Do we know how much frontage this lot has on 209?
How many feet? Bill, what is the,
Should say on the map.
on the,
It's not.
Since given.
Because the Ulster County comment is getting at Route 209, visual, yeah.
the visual on 209?
Well,
There are plantings from the existing initial application many years ago. That's already in place.
I don't see the number.
Nothing of the business aspect has changed other than the addition of the house.
That may be so, but I assume they went out there, they looked at it and they were asking for more. Okay. I don't know how,
Well, it's a required modification, so you can debate the pros and cons of it, but you still have to deal with it.
And I would also suggest that, if there was any reason why the county decided to, to put in a recommendation when they didn't do it before, it's probably this one. It was the first one, and they put.
160.
They put some thought into it.
So it's 150 feet.
Okay.
I just measured it. Maybe 160.
So the way way Rick and I worked on the draft. Decision was, specific condition 2 on the top of page 5. Essentially says this will be complied with. That's got to be done before Rick signs the back.
The landscape plan.
Right.
Right. So Dave brings up another point for the board to consider. We can either defer the decision and request the landscape plan from the applicant before we go to the decision. So you get the landscape plan, the board looks at it and says it's satisfactory, as we do with all the other site plans. Or we proceed, we're making a decision. And Dave has verbiage in there that suggests that you would give me the okay to look at whatever's in terms of the plan. I would okay it, and then I could proceed and sign. I don't want to make that decision. So I'm not recommending one way or the other.
You
If
do have-
guys are okay with it,
You do have the third option, which Mr. Gordon pointed out, which you can override that
we could say.
by
no
a super
landscape.
majority vote.
You'd still be doing anyway.
While on the
Right.
SWIP, yes,
So
you could separate these things out and override one or the other or both or none.
Okay.
Vote on them separately. I thought we did it on this.
It's, yeah, you could do that. Sure.
Yeah,
I defer to Dave on how to handle
the way
it.
I'm looking at this is that, number one, the likelihood is we're gonna take one vote, which will, unless we do all four, we're gonna need a vote to override. I would also reiterate my recommendation that this first one, I think, is the real crux of what the county was doing, and so the board should decide how it wants to handle it, regardless of an override, which is probably gonna have to happen anyway. You're probably gonna need 5 votes. But what do you want to do about the county's recommendation that this have a landscaping plan for screening along Route 209? Your 3 levels are to have it reviewed by the board, which would defer this a month. Secondly, just to approve it and have Rick take a look at it, basically to approve the elements of it and whatever discretion he's got. And thirdly, just skip it and override anyway.
Do we have any photos or anything in the file of the current visual from the road? Do we know what it looks like? No. What do you think?
I don't believe there's any visuals in the file.
Is there any fencing along through?
There's a
split rail fence along the
split rail fence.
209 on both sides. And then there's decorative, flowers and shrubs and
Those
plantings.
existing plantings?
They've been there for 20 plus years.
More landscaping than any of the businesses either side, north and south of the gas
Yeah, I
station.
can confirm that.
There's
It's
nothing,
absolutely, it's.
the parts place up the
Big ones.
road, nothing. It's got more landscaping than pretty much the other properties adjacent to it.
Jennifer, if you want to pull up on Google Maps, it's
There.
5776 US 209.
Maybe more, because they need plan.
And Street View shows it not really well.
And there is landscaping there.
There's there's a split rail fence, as Bill said, and then there's looks like plantings, but yeah.
Next week.
So I will make a recommendation, that we not defer this another month. That you allow me to, to get a recommendation from the applicant. I'll take a look at it,
The landscape plan.
landscape plan, only with the landscape plan. And so we proceed with the decision. And in proceeding with the decision, that would be part of the approval, that I'll take a look at it. The other 3 items, in order to, we're gonna have to have a supermajority vote in order to, and it's referred to in the decision, in order to satisfy what's necessary for the Ulster
Well,
County Planning Board.
The health department, we're gonna have the health department approval as a condition, right?
We have
You
it.
You have, it's
So that
been
was-
met.
So that's done. So it's really overriding because of the seeker thing, which we can't work around, and the stormwater thing, which we're not going to.
Well, we should vote before we read the decision to retype it as a type 2, correct? We typed it incorrectly as unlisted.
It is a type. I mean,
No, we don't need it. Yes
and
or
we
no?
don't bother. It's a
Okay.
type 2 action.
Rick, based on the fact that there is already pre-existing landscaping, which is more substantial than other businesses in the area, and the fact that several members of the board already recognize that there is plantings and it is aesthetically pleasing. Is it possible to get a majority vote on all four of those?
You mean override all four?
Yes.
If the board wants to override all four and not have a landscape plan submitted, that's,
The board's gonna override. The question is whether you want to include the requirement for a landscape plan as a condition. And we've already drafted that, right?
It's currently drafted as a condition of approval that the landscape plan will still happen with the approval of the chairman.
Right, so that's on the table right now. It's in the condition. The board is, assuming that we're gonna get 5 votes on this, the board is likely gonna override. So the question is, does the board want that condition to be in the special conditions? The condition would be to have the applicant submit a landscape plan for Rick's approval.
so let me just go around it. Peter, what do you want to do?
I would say you.
Okay.
I strongly recommend that.
Alina?
Excuse me, repeat the question, I'm sorry, I was just looking at the phone.
Do you want to override the county's requirement for landscape plan, or do you want to allow that one item to get a landscape plan? Let me look at it and say, yeah, that's good enough. And
That I would be more.
okay, so you're a
comfortable with
yes.
that. That's a yes.
Yes.
I agree.
Okay, so that settles that. So
look at-
Lyle, to your request, no, we're gonna get a landscape plan. Work with, work with Men in Back and Acres to, as to what you need,
And so for the other 2 requirements, we're gonna have to require an override vote of at least 5 to pass it.
right?
And that's the 2 that overriding are the seeker, which is just wrong and it just happened that way, and the stormwater.
Right. So we good with that? Okay, so I'm gonna read the decision. Dave, keep me honest here, because I have so many copies of this decision. I went through
Just
this.
read one copy.
You're just doing the specific conditions?
Well, I'm only gonna, all right, so what I'm gonna do here, as I've done with the others. You have the conditions in front of you, the decision rather in front of you, it's dated tonight. I'm gonna skip all the stuff on the first page, including the 25 pieces of information that were delivered to us, documents reviewed. I'm gonna skip the section that says notice of public hearing. I'm gonna read the findings. I'm gonna skip the general conditions, so let me read the findings.
Close the hearing.
Oh, thank you.
I'll make a motion. to
Make
close
a
the public
motion
hearing.
to close the public hearing. Thank you, Dave.
I'll make a motion to close the public hearing.
Peter makes the motion second.
I'll make a second.
Jennifer? All in favor? Of closing the public hearing? Aye, any objection?
Do we need to, where, did you ask if anybody?
I did it at the outset.
Okay,
So we have 6 ayes, no nays, and 1 absence. To close the public hearing. Thank you. That would have been another vote. All right, so I'm gonna read the findings on page 3. 1, the planning board received a zoning permit determination and referral from the CEO number 24/522 dated 9/23/24 and revised 11/12/24. Parcel is approximately 2.7 acres and is in the B zoning district. The applicant has met with the planning board numerous times to discuss various items. The site plan, including maps, elevations, and septic plan, was revised in response to this discussion. 4, PB declared itself lead agency and determined this action to be unlisted and then coordinated on January 13, 2025 under the secret process. Subsequently, the planning board determined that this application was a type 2 under seeker and no further environmental assessment was required. 5, application was referred to the Ulster County Planning Board, who reviewed the project on 2/5/25 and returned recommendation memo 2025-11-12, requiring 4 modifications. The PB finds, the planning board finds that these modifications for seeker documentation and health department approval have been met. The modification for landscaping is a condition of this decision. And the modification for drainage has been met with the revised site plan, and the PB finds that a SWIP is not necessary. 1 public comment regarding the project related to the presence of a drainage easement on the subject property and the need for sensitivity to neighborhood drainage. The site plan map was revised to locate this drainage easement, to address site drainage, and to position site features to avoid conflict with this easement. 7, all pertinent conditions required by town code have been met by the applicant. Findings were prepared by the chairman and or town planner, were read and discussed as needed by the planning board in a public meeting at the time and the place of adoption. Now resolved, the town of Rochester Planning Board hereby grants special use permit and site plan amendment final approval, permitting the construction of a single-family dwelling, an accessory garage to the town of Rochester pursuant to a proposed site plan dated February 4th, 2025, subject to these general and specific conditions of approval. General conditions of approval, it's the same as what we've read in the past. I'm not going to read them again. In all the other decisions, specific conditions of approval, these I will read. 1, this application was referred to the Ulster County Planning Board, who returned recommendation memo 2025-11-12. Ulster County Planning Board returned 4 required modifications. The planning board finds these modifications for secret documentation and health department approval have been met. The modification for drainage has been met with the revised site plan, and planning board finds a SWIP is not necessary. 2, the modification for landscaping is a condition of this decision. Specifically, a schedule must be provided and approved by the planning board chairman, indicating the number, types, and sizes of all landscaping to be provided as well as their placement. All landscaping shall be native species. All landscaping storage areas shall be fenced and landscaped. Any outdoor storage of materials, vehicles, or equipment outside of areas designated for storage on the final revised site plan shall be removed. 3, the siting of the proposed dwelling and garage must be shown on the final revised site plan submitted and dated 2/4/25. Additionally, construction of the dwelling and garage will be consistent with all site plan documentation provided. Notably, the elevation and details for Lyle Robot sheet prepared by Menenbeck and Eggers and Carr dated 10/30/25. 4, the subject users shall comply at all times with Town Code 140-20H relating to illumination of the property and off-property impacts. 5, all conditions of decision PB 2003-9 special use permit for the Lyle Roebuck special use permit for the storage of landscape materials for resale shall continue to be met and binding. These 8 conditions are as follows. So what Dave did was a reminder that all the previous site plan conditions are still in effect. And so they were carried forward in this decision. So 5A, there shall be no more than 11 piles of materials stored on the site plan as per approved site plan. B, the piles of materials shall be no more than 20 by 20 in width and 15 feet in height. C, materials shall include mulch, sand, stone, and topsoil. D, all fertilizers shall be contained. E, the temporary storage containers as shown and labeled on the approved site plan revised dated October 4th, 2004 shall be allowed on site temporarily through January 2006, upon which time they must be removed. Any improvements to a replacement of said structure shall require additional approvals by the planning board and building department. F, evergreen trees required, this was in the back, shall be 2 rows staggered placement with 20 trees total at a minimum of 3 feet height and planting. G, construction of access shall be in accordance with approved site plan and New York State DOT Highway Work Permit number 8-4-446. H, all improvements shall be constructed in compliance with approval site plan prior to operation. 6, drainage easement as recorded on the map entitled Map of Subdivision of Queens Village Estates 2. Section 2 of October 6, 1993, and filed and stamped by County Clerk Albert Spader on 10/5/94 shall be added to the final map for this project. And quote unquote, the easement is granted to the owners of Queens Village Estate to provide drainage from Hamilton Drive. Drainage easement shown hereon are to establish the perpetual right to discharge stormwater runoff from the roadway and surrounding area onto and over the affected premises by means of pipes, culverts, ditches, or a combination thereof, together with the right of the holder of fee title to the roadway or its authorized representatives to enter said premises for purposes of making such installations and doing such maintenance as said holder of fee title may deem necessary to adequately drain the road, referring to the road in Queens Village Estates, to drain the road and surrounding area. Structures and disposal waste or fill areas are prohibited within this easement. 7, all conditions of approval, numbers 1 through 6 for this project shall be recorded on the final map before signing by the chair. The Town of Rochester Planning Board further grants authority to the chairman to certify that these conditions have been met, at which time the chairman is authorized to sign and date the plan without further resolution by the planning board. This special use and site plan amendment approval shall expire 180 days from this approval date unless the final plat is presented and signed by the chairman. This period may be extended for 2 additional 90-day periods upon application to and approval by the Town of Rochester Planning Board. The effects of approval, this special use and site plan amendment approval and associated conditions shall be binding upon the applicant and all successive owners of the land so long as such use shall occur. 2, this approval shall remain effective as an authorization to secure the required permits and establish uses for a maximum of 1 year from this date of approval, unless the applicant shall have submitted written request and the planning board shall have adopted such resolution granting an extension, and provided the applicant has submitted proof of having diligently pursued the implementation of the plans. If the special use permit is discontinued, or the permit is not exercised as defined in Town Zoning Code 140-43 for a period of 2 or more years, it shall be deemed to have lapsed without hearing a notice. Draft resolution was prepared by the chairman and/or town planner, was read and discussed as needed by the planning board in a public meeting at the time and place of adoption. So I'll entertain a motion of approval.
I'll make the motion.
Peter makes the motion. Second. David Roberts. Any discussion by the board? Any comments? Okay, I'll entertain a vote. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Anybody opposed? No, nobody abstaining. So 6 ayes, no nays, and 1 absent. So Bill, all of those conditions need to be on the map. As mentioned here, was it 1 through 6, I think it is. And then we're gonna need a landscape plan. You and I can talk about what it needs to look like. And there's a couple of plans that your firm has done that would satisfy, in my mind, what has to be done, acknowledging that there is some work that's already been done. So we can talk about that during the week. All right?
Right.
Okay, we're done. Thank you.
Does that, that included the override, right? Because that was part of what.
I can't hear you, Bill, sorry.
What you just approved included the override of the county requirements there.
We got a vote of 6-0.
Included that anyway.
So you have a super majority vote. The only thing that wasn't overridden was the landscape, piece, and that was made clear in the decision. So
Well, the override doesn't need to be specific, as long as it doesn't include any of the county's conditions, the condition is overridden. It's approved. And it didn't, and the 3 of the conditions were not included in one word.
and we got the super majority.
Actually, two were not included. The health department is included. So it's 2 and 2.
Health department's included because you did it. You have it. So we're good.
Right.
Okay.
All right, thank you.
Okay, let's just take a 5-minute break before we go into Verizon. Okay.
This.
That's, yeah,
Thank
that's
you.
Robin.
Thank you.
Mr. Allen.
Hey, Matt, how are you? Good to see you.
That's all right.
Do you want to,
Yeah.
do we have Matt's? That's on. He can take my chair. Matt, there's an extra chair. Matt, there's an extra chair over there.
You can be Zorian for a day.
Yeah, that would help an accent.
Pardon?
Have to develop an accent. Yeah.
I was in there going. Very cooperative clerk there now.
Oh, it really.
Got them the files. But they made it, I know they said, yeah, there's no documentation on the plan. Yeah.
And it was totally when they.
Yeah, well,
This was also.
20 miles east of this floor units. And there's only 15 minutes.
Oh, he sent you the document. I know, I saw it. Right. I get it, but I can't answer that.
He can't even.
And he works on it. Well, you can also say.
Must have been a crash.
So. So. Yeah. This one, if you mention this, that's when you raise for 6.
Oh, yeah.
But that,
Saratoga, so he's, visual consultant.
Right.
Yeah. Even findings, this is the findings that have special conditions you want to point out. Whole thing. Just get a question.
The other thing I've learned about her.
Okay, let's reconvene. Scott, do you want to
I haven't asked you.
take the seats of honor here? And Dina, right? Dina, and where is
It's just us. Yeah.
Brendan? Where's Brendan?
Couldn't make
Couldn't make it.
But we thought this
Is there something we said last time or what?
No, just that, we mostly we were talking about the balloon locations,
Okay.
so he really didn't.
It's mainly my window.
So I think he had something else scheduled as a result of that.
All right, so it's time for Verizon. I've sent out a couple of, quite a number of things over the last couple of days, reflecting letters from the public. Letters from the PIPC, which is the Palisade Interstate Parks Commission. And numerous other things to keep the board up to date. They were all in your Google Drive as well. And I also sent you something yesterday, kind of giving an idea of what I wanted to do today. But before that, I want to introduce Matt Allen. Matt Allen is from Saratoga Associates. We hired him as our consultant to do the visual impact assessment on behalf of the board. Matt was the gentleman that was on the screen the last time that,
Talking.
and I don't know who was talking last time, but it was,
There was a lag.
it was wild. I think the screen was taking over. So that's why he's sitting here with us. And Scott Allen and Dina, I don't remember your last name. Peebles, thank you. I'm sure I remember them. So let me just, I'll give you an idea. Matt, we're gonna let you sit for a little while rather Scott, we're gonna let you sit for a little while. Well, the board has a discussion and hopefully a robust discussion about a number of items. Some of which we talked about last time, but some new items. And what I wanted to have happen is to have Matt go through for everybody. The nature of the study that he's going to be conducting / monitoring / directing on our behalf. I'm familiar with it, and as you know, Helena and Peter was sort of a team of people working with Dave Church initially to get things ranking. But now it's time that the entire board be made aware of everything that's going on in great detail. So I wanted Matt to go through that, so you all can ask questions about the balloon test, the height that it has to be at. Matt, I did inform some people about the as of right, the 20 additional feet as of right, so you could refer to that. It's very important that the board understand that in detail. Matt has given us some advice about how to conduct a balloon test, which he'll go through. Some of you may agree, disagree, you may have questions, so I want to get that all on the table. So that's the first thing. Then after Matt is finished, I want Peter and Helena and Dave to give us kind of a summary of some of the things that they've been doing. Helena, you've been particularly active talking to the Palisades people, the Shawanga Byway people from Minnewaska. So I just want you to give, not now, but after Matt speaks, kind of a summary of some of that. Peter has worked with Helena on the sites that we're going to do the visuals from. In fact, I have a list of those visuals right here that I'll pass out before Peter speaks. And then Dave, I know, wants to just do some summary of the activities that he's been involved in. And then I do want to talk a little bit about site plan with the board. It's premature to get into the details of it, but I had asked Greg Bollner, our engineer, to give me some impressions of the site plan that was presented to us. And he did. But some of you have also given me impressions about the site plan from the perspective of the nearness of the tower to the apartment building. So I want to get into that as well, both from the perspective of, well, I know so. So Matt, why don't you discuss with the board, kick off the discussion with the board of the visual testing that's done. And if you will remember, we went through the radio frequency discussion last time. I'll call it the needs assessment. You can refer to that too, because you of course know a lot about that as well. So Matt, I'm going to give you the floor for the next whatever amount of time you need to describe what's going on.
Yeah, thank you, Rick.
And the other piece is there's a lot of people from the public, obviously. So this hopefully will answer a lot of their questions as well.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. Again, I'm Matt Allen. I'm with a company called Saratoga Associates, landscape architects, engineers, and planners. And I am the principal in charge of our visual impact assessment for practice. And I've been doing that type of work for over 30 years. And it really is, for all practical purposes, all I do with the firm. And I do visual impact assessments for telecom towers regularly, as well as a number of project types. The town code, the telecom portion of the town code does have some requirements for visual assessment for the tower. The most well spelled out portion of that is for a balloon visibility test. And in a nutshell, that requires a balloon be floated at the project site for 4 consecutive hours between the hours of, I think it's 8 a.m. and 4 p.m. On 2 days. Of those 2 days, one needs to be a Friday or Monday, and the other has to be a Saturday or a Sunday. The balloon needs to be of a size representative of the antenna size. So I will leave that to the applicant to, assure that that portion of the code is met, or if the applicant wants to discuss it with the board, I'll leave that to the board to talk about that, but that is what the code says. Typically, as I said, the balloon is floated at the project location as close to the tower center as is practicable. What I mean by that is often the location of the tower may be in close proximity to trees. Obviously, you want to keep the balloon away from trees to not become entangled. Overhead wires, you want to be particularly careful with. And balloon tests, I consider more of an art than a science. A lot of people think that you put the balloon up and it's a perfect marker. The wind blows. Dina, I heard you last week saying you do this regularly. I had a test this weekend. This weekend was forecast as perfect.
Never ends up that way.
This weekend was the first time I ever put a balloon up that we had to take it down, even though the weather forecast in real time called for perfect wind. The microclimate blew the balloon over, and that particular town planning board said this is useless. So be prepared for that. Be patient. Your code is a little more rigorous than we typically see because you require 2 different days. One has to be a Friday or Monday, and the other has to be a Saturday or Sunday. Trying to get the wind to cooperate on those days, you may have to wait several weeks. So typically what you do is identify the preferred day and then have a rain date or a wind date to roll over to.
Or 3.
Or 3 or 4,
Yeah.
Whatever is practical.
I think our code also has provisions for public notice about all of
Yes,
this.
and it does need to be publicly noticed 10 days in advance in an official town newspaper, and that's obviously very common. You want the neighbors to be aware.
Quick question. So that public notice, would we be able to publish if we're planning for X day? They also include that if this cannot occur on X day, it would then occur on Y, Z, etc. day instead. That way we're not having to restart the clock of the notice every time.
I guess I'll have to have our attorney read it in detail as to what it says, but I believe what you just said is how it would be worded.
Given previous discussions with Matt, who's describing the experience that he just described, I would certainly recommend that. But I would also add that we probably ought to have some very clear notification provisions, as in, if this day gets canceled, we will have it this X day, but also notification for confirmation will be available on the town's website at this page or something like
That's what I
that.
was gonna recommend, so that way we put it on the town website, confirmation that it either will or will not. Yeah, no, that's.
I'm
sorry.
convinced that you and Matt can work out agreeable language. We all want this to happen as expeditiously as possible and with as full notice as possible and as few mistakes as possible in terms of informing the public. So
Yes.
I'm sure you guys are experienced at that. We will expect that to be done as completely as possible.
Yeah, it's just unfortunately, as he noticed, sometimes we have a day's notice that this isn't gonna work, or we'll go out there and we'll discover, okay, it should have been perfect, but it wasn't.
Let's get some really clear clear notification provisions that people can understand and jump on pretty quickly.
Can do.
And
Typically,
both
what
Peter and Helena have worked with the town clerk in terms of getting all this updated to the website, so we have a process for our stuff that goes up on the website in place, so it's just a matter of the verbiage being satisfactory. They can develop it, you need to tell us it's satisfactory.
Yeah, typically what I see, that's what we're talking about is rollover dates clearly spelled out with enough built into the one legal notice in the newspaper that it allows for flexibility. If there's a cancellation, then there's a pre-published backup date and even a pre-published backup.
Is there typically real-time confirmation as in, morning of the balloon test we're on, it's on the website?
I usually try to make a go, no-go call around noon the day before, because that's when the wind forecasts generally are pretty
And we
wide.
put it, my point is, would we put that would we put that confirmation on the website?
You certainly can say, in the ad, say, please check the town website, after 12 PM the day before. Because that's when I would get on the phone, we check on it and say, what does it look like to you? The parameters for a go, no go, every visual analyst may look a little differently at it. I usually try to look at the wind and say 5 miles an hour, it can creep up to 8. Usually at launch time, if it's 5, and then the forecast for the duration is 8 or under for the rest of the day, I'll make a go call. In January, February, winds are a little higher. If you're really trying to get it done, maybe 10, the balloon's gonna waffle quite a bit at that wind. But it really depends on how long you think you're gonna wait, if you're looking for that perfect day. So that's just something that we would have to look at the weather the day before and say, what do you think the chances of success are?
Matt, I remember when you spoke to us, once before, the size of the balloon is, I think on town code says it has to mimic the size of the antenna. So in the case of this tower, the antenna, it's gonna look like you're gonna need 3 balloons in order to get it wide enough.
Yeah, is it 12, 13 feet-ish?
Well, the width, I believe, is 12 foot.
Well,
The width is 12 foot, but
Yeah.
the antennas, the heights themselves vary. It can go anywhere from 1 foot to 8 foot. Typically, what we do, we either do a 3 foot or 4 foot balloon. Because that's plenty visible in the surrounding areas. And it's also easily visible to figure out, okay, the antenna width is gonna be 2 times the size of that balloon, or whatever the case might be.
So you string 3 balloons and that's what you put up?
We
Three
put one
balloons?
balloon,
Huh?
one balloon at the tower location. Then sometimes we'll do a marker balloon above that. With the understanding that the lower balloon is the actual tower location. Second balloon is just
But these antennae go out, so that balloon's not gonna mimic the 12
well,
feet out.
it's gonna sway anyways.
Yeah, what you're talking about is typical, however, the code
Okay,
spells it out.
Doesn't that make it less accurate though? Because when you have more surface area, if you have a smaller surface area, I mean, it's gonna blow a lot more. I mean, I know what the code says.
Well, not necessarily. There's more lift. It's,
Yeah.
if there's wind, there's gonna be wind.
Yep.
But the code says what the code says, and that would be
Okay.
something that the board would have to say.
Yeah, we talked a lot about that it has to be I forget the exact wording in the code, but you convinced me you needed 3 balloons in order to mimic the size
If
of
you're
the.
going to do an antenna width that, typical telecom antennas are gonna be around 12 feet, maybe a little bit more. To do that, either you get a 12-foot balloon, which is,
Good luck.
I've done that,
Alright.
believe it or not, or you get 3 smaller balloons and put them in a triangle formation.
Could I ask a clarifying question here? Is the purpose of the balloons merely to show where it's gonna be visible from, and later on you can fill in what it's gonna look like in terms of simulation,
Yes.
or it actually give a sense for what it's gonna look like?
It's, the balloon test serves a couple of purposes. For the visual analyst, frankly, for the visual analyst, it's not even necessary. Tectonic has already put together some photo simulations that, based on how you describe the methodology, is a correct way to do it, and they are probably quite accurate. So the visual analyst can model and simulate the tower in a photograph without a balloon. However, the balloon helps the public understand where in space this tower is going to be. The balloon does not represent the tower. You can put balloons up that have the spread of the antenna. That's going to give you some scale. But they are just balloons. They're bright red balloons that.
But the point I'm trying to make is that after the balloon test, we can and will require the applicant to generate simulations based on the balloon test that will demonstrate what this thing is gonna look like, so that you don't have to worry about whether the balloon is exactly the dimensions of the tower and the antennas, which it's not gonna be. And furthermore, if we have a balloon test at 145 feet, and we see the visibility, we can require simulations at different heights. So we can get on the seeker end, we can get a sense of the impacts without trying to make the balloon look like the tower.
As I was saying, the balloon serves two purposes. One, it's for the public and the board to physically see where in space the tower will be. The balloon will, in a perfectly calm day, the balloon is going to represent the top of the tower. And you can see that, you can say, okay, I thought it was going to be higher, I thought it was going to be lower, I thought it was here. That's where it's going to be. That helps the public. It helps the visual analyst because that can be used as a survey point in space to match your simulation to, which is helpful, but not as necessary as a layperson might think, because there are other benchmarks in the field photography that we can use to align where the tower would be in the simulation. It's not a bad thing to have, and the town code requires it, so we'll do it.
But at the end of the day, I'm expecting that the real seeker work can be done through the simulations. Which the balloon test will be an input into, but when we want to see what it looks like, we're going to be looking at simulations, perhaps at different heights, perhaps with different types of towers, perhaps with different sets of antennas and things like that. But that can be done. We can ask for a bunch of different things. The balloon will nail that down in terms of space, but we don't have to worry about the balloon looking like the tower.
That's exactly correct.
I just want to say, I find the simulations, the photographs, pretty unconvincing, hard to really understand what the tower looks like, because they're single dimensional, and it's different to driving down the road and seeing something appear and disappear, and then making a turn and then seeing it.
So you want to see the balloons do a better job of mimicking the tower?
Excuse me?
You want to see the balloons do a better job of mimicking?
No, I think the balloons do it. What I'm saying is that flat representation in a photograph is hard to understand the real visual impact. And I think of the times when I've seen a beautiful view and I take a photo, and then in the photo, everything looks way further apart, further away, and it doesn't really capture what I'm seeing in real life. So I think there's so much value in.
We have a smart person to solve that problem, right?
There is methodology to address that.
Yeah, I understand that with the camera.
When you take the camera with a 50mm lens, which is considered a normal lens, it distorts. It has the least amount of distortion in the image. If you think of a fisheye lens or wide angle lens, you can actually see curvature. You may not see that on a typical wide angle lens, but it actually does exist. A 50mm lens is going to minimize that. So that's one reason to use a 50mm lens. The other reason to use a 50mm, which is basing it on a full frame sensor for photography wonks. But the other reason to do it is if you print that out on an 11x17 sheet, if you were to hold it at about arm's length, or what somebody would by human nature do, if you were to go in the field and do this, things would match up.
Right.
So that's kind of a layperson's methodology. I would always encourage people to take the photo simulations out in the field and do this and just get an idea, because that's going to add that three-dimensionality back. It is a two-dimensional presentation of a three-dimensional world, so you have to understand it is not perfect. So yes, the balloon test can give you a little bit more depth perception.
Yeah.
Okay, and what I was gonna go back is that, remember you talked about having 3 balloons triangled right here? That could potentially negatively affect the visual, like when we're making the sims. Because now you've taken say it was a 3-foot diameter balloon. Well, now you have 3 balloons side by side, so you don't necessarily know where one balloon ends. You just have 3-foot vertical, but you no longer have the horizontal. So if you have at a distance, you just see a red blob in the distance. Sometimes it can be difficult to figure out the scaling based off something that is wider than it is tall, especially if it's being bobbed around. So that in that case, a single balloon, even if it's 4 foot instead of 12 foot or 8 foot works better for that.
So what I'm sensing is I know what our code says and you're suggesting that you're not gonna follow, you don't wanna follow the code.
I'd prefer not to, but we will do what you ask.
It's
What are
just
we
an
doing?
accuracy issue.
Yeah,
I think you have the right to waive certain things in your code, but if you want us to do it that way,
Well, what
we'll
I-
do it that way. It just may not be as accurate.
I want the most accurate. None of us sitting on this table, except for you and you,
Mhm.
are experts in this, so you're our expert. The lady is your expert. You tell us what's gonna be the best for the town to evaluate in the process.
I will say this, I've done easily 100 balloon tests for telecom. And I've done the 3 balloon method.
You've done
And
a
I
3
would-
balloon
For the
method.
three, exactly as your code is written,
Right.
I've been asked to do that once.
Mhm.
And I would not. Look forward to doing it twice for the same project.
Because of the wind issues and because of the.
It takes a very large amount of helium, which is a mobilization issue. It is challenging to raise that tri-cluster of balloons. And then knowing wind as it is, a lot of times you're postponing, the test could fail. It's just extra logistics. But it is what your code says. And when I did it once, the municipality was very insistent that that's the way it be done. So if we did it and it was successful, I would not have wanted to do it a second day. And I was not asked to do that.
I would just give a little bit of perspective that there are times that telecommunications zoning codes are drafted very strictly. And there are times when the practicalities of the review and the project require relaxing some of the standards. I mean, in this case, we're being asked to relax a standard that functionally is approximately 95 feet in height, going up to 145. And that's not an atypical well, they're not all drafted like that, but it's not at all atypical that you have sometimes very strict standards that are, drafted in a vacuum that don't always hold up to the practicalities. I'm not sure what Matt's impression of that is, but I've certainly seen that before. And like just the fact that here we've got a standard that says, what is it, 50 feet higher than the trees, which in this case is about 95 feet, and they want 145. So right there, if we were to in any way entertain this application, that standard's just out the window and we're functionally putting in a new one. So I'm not sure if we're gonna get there, but that's the way sometimes these things work out. And we don't do this very often for other site plans, but for towers, it seems to work out that way sometimes. I don't know what you think about that.
So you're suggesting that, I think you're suggesting that it'd be sufficient to do a rather wide balloon, and you'd be able to simulate. You'd be able to simulate with that one balloon what you might,
Yeah,
you might not be able to get any accuracy by putting up 3 balloons because
you're not going to get any greater accuracy.
any greater.
The only purpose of doing 3 is to allow the board and the public to physically see what the width of the antenna will be, which has value. But that same information will be provided in the resultant photo simulation.
How does the board have any comments?
I have a question, which is you're suggesting a 3 to 4 foot balloon, but what are the sizes that are available?
3, 4, 5, 6, 8.
I mean, I think there's some benefit, to having and I understand the downside, but I personally feel there's some benefit, particularly for the public and us, to be able to see as realistically as possible. Understanding the fact that you're gonna go back and do a photo simulation, so it's a marker in space. It's like doing a special effect in a movie, that you're making a reference point that you're gonna use as to create a simulation, which will include a proposed drawing of the tower, I would imagine, a more complete picture. But I think that there is some benefit for us to get a sense of, like, if somebody sees a 3 foot balloon, they say, oh, that's not a big deal. But if it's gonna be 4 times that size, I think that is a big deal, particularly for the public to see. But
Yeah.
So generally, whenever we do, I know like when we do cell sites up in like the APA, they require a 4 foot balloon actually, they require 2 4-foot balloons.
Maybe here at Arundic Park Agency?
That is correct. So they require a 4-foot balloon and then a second 4-foot balloon above that to act as a marker. The marker is less important, so they'll let us do the 3-foot to reduce the amount of helium used, because helium is it's a scarce commodity. It's not exactly easy to find. So they've allowed us recently to start using 3-foot balloons to act as the marker, while the 4-foot balloon acts as the actual tower location. I don't know if that's something that would be feasible.
So
Just to-
I think we need to come to a conclusion on this factor
Okay.
tonight.
Yeah,
What's your recommendation?
my recommendation is if you choose to deviate from the letter of your code, the balloon should be a minimum of 4 feet. 4 feet is reasonable. That can be seen for easily well over a mile. Kind of no matter what you do beyond a mile, is tough to spot with the naked eye. But a minimum of 4 feet. And helium is a somewhat expensive and rare resource. Every foot balloon diameter that you increase doubles the amount of helium required to fill it, just mathematics. But minimum of 4 feet.
Other
And
comments?
I don't have a feeling on the marker balloon, other than sometimes if the public is unaware that there's a marker balloon, their impression is going to be the marker is the top of the tower. So it needs to be very
What purpose does the marker balloon have?
Just to help aid the visibility.
Above
So
having,
Above
it
and
should be taller than the actual.
Yeah, it's usually about 10 to 20 feet above the actual tower, just so
Yeah.
when you're out in the field.
When you're out in the field, if you only see one balloon,
That's
you know that
confusing.
you're not seeing the tower.
That's confusing, I think.
I think that would confuse
Yes,
the
I
public.
agree.
I know the Adirondack Park Agency requires it. I never found the value.
is there a significant downside to doing 2 balloons that are 4 feet as opposed to 3? I mean, is there a big difference there?
Depending on how they're oriented, it either could show a width if you're looking at it face on. If they're both lined up, it's gonna be narrower. I don't see that there's an advantage to doing 2. As
What
opposed,
if we did 3 threes?
then you end up with a 6-foot. At any given profile.
At any profile, from every angle? You don't have to worry about something hiding something else, one balloon hiding the other balloon.
Yeah, easier to do.
The board have any feeling about?
I think, to Peter's point, I think there's value in trying to show a larger mass, just because you're at risk otherwise of putting up a 4-foot balloon and someone looking at that and saying, oh, what's the fuss about? When we're really talking about 12 foot at the top of the tower, right? And to dismiss it. So I think, I don't know what the magic number is, but I think more than one 4-foot balloon is in order here, especially as it is in an important location with the proximity to the state park and.
From many different angles.
Yeah.
Think about, because it needs to be done in 2 days, a compromise being the 3 balloon method done on 1 day. And then when you have a successful day, with that, then a second day would be done with a smaller balloon. There's other ways to.
So why don't we do 3 threes? That way you don't have the angle problem, you see it from every angle, right? And then what's your, and on this,
As opposed to 2 threes, yes.
and then what's your recommendation for the second day? Do 2 fours? Do,
I wouldn't change in that,
so do,
or 1 4. It gets complicated. I'm trying to find a compromise between the level of effort it would take to fly I'm looking at 3 6-foot balloons to represent the full spread of the tower. And that's a challenge to do. It can be done. It's a challenge to do. If the board were inclined to stick with the code and require that. A compromise would be, once you have a successful balloon test with that configuration, the second day could be, say 1 4-foot. That's just a suggestion to the board.
All right, so the first day would be 3 6s.
If that's the only way you can meet what the code
What the
says,
code says, and then the second day would be,
1 4-foot.
what does the board think of that?
Why do you have the second day?
That's what the code says.
I think that, I'm guessing the attempt was to do a weekday and then next weekend because of,
I think it's people's
To
availability,
give people access to.
give access.
Yeah.
and particularly because, the park is a big concern here.
Yeah.
Is that there's traffic at the park is much more significant and hikers in the area over the weekend.
Yes.
Typically.
All right, so 3 6s. And then the second day would be a 4.
Do you have to deflate and get rid of the helium, or is there a way to recover it? No,
It's all disposable, can't even reuse the balloons.
just make funny voices.
Can we, what do people think about doing the 3 6s on the weekend day? Because I'm assuming that's when you're gonna have most people out.
I think it's gonna be weather dependent, really, so it's gonna be.
If you wanted, you have the best chance for success by waiting for a good day to do the larger configuration. And then once you have that and have it successfully photographed, then you could comply with the code by picking, let's just say your successful day is a Saturday. Now you still have to comply with the Friday, Monday. That's easier to do with a smaller balloon. You could do it any way you wanted.
All right, so
Well, the problem is the trade-off that Dave is suggesting is if the first successful day is a weekday, then you're missing the bigger presentation on, as Peter mentioned, the weekend, which is when the park gets popular
Well,
and the valley is popular.
We try and do the first one on the weekend, right? Pinpoint that weekend, and then you got 5 days and the
What
following
you're missing
week.
is that this could be pretty catch as catch can in March.
You'd probably be giving up a Good Friday if you were waiting for Saturday.
Yeah,
And this honestly could extend over a month, trying to hit. the-
That's what I was gonna raise. We still have 2 balloon tests, one of which was scheduled in December, mid-December, has yet to be done. Because we have had the worst winds,
where was that?
Tuxedo. We literally mid-December, they're like, yeah, do it, and we're like, yeah, we can't. We try, and we had a couple of days. So the point is that I hear what you're saying. Also, I'm not sure they'll do it on a Sunday. I know what the code says, so they'll do it on a Saturday. Sundays, I guess, their day of rest.
so, I mean, how long is the tower proposed to be in place? A long time, right?
The tower?
Yeah,
Oh, yeah, definitely a long time.
yeah, so I think that if it takes a month to do a
Well,
test.
Oh, I'm fine with that.
Remember, we're
My point is
we're also
that
chasing the
in
vegetation.
April, the
Sorry.
We've
leaves
got
come
a
in,
we've got a vegetation issue.
which is fine by
You need to
us,
get this
because you
done
really
by
don't need the
April.
balloon test
So-
for a period.
So we'd have to, what is the start date that we're thinking
It'll
about?
probably be sometime mid-March.
Mid-March, right?
So that gives us a month, and our consultant is telling us that a month, we might have thought that a month would have been a nice luxury to have,
Yeah.
but what we're hearing is that may not be true, so. Just, my suggestion is we look at a minimax strategy here, let's, get it done and not make the perfect enemy of the good.
Yeah.
Let's get something efficient that we can, because I think later on, I think ultimately we're gonna, we can work with the applicant to, do a lot with visual simulations. If it's perhaps insufficient in one level, maybe we can get different parallax on it or something like that, or perspectives, but we don't want to be facing something in late April when the leaves start coming back. And we don't have
I
any-
understand.
But can I, on that point though, since we've done some of the modeling work, that modeling work was done during a leaf off condition, so if the balloon is floated, no, well, you have visibility. Yeah.
All right, so I think the consensus from the board, we want to try to adhere to the town code, with respect to town, the sense of the town code. 3 6s weekend, and then the weekday could be a 4, single 4. And we're just gonna have to catch good weather. And if we don't, we wait.
And just.
But I think Peter is right and Dave is right in terms of, we've got to get something that's bigger, that's big. For purposes of the public to be able to see it. And the most public is available on the weekends. And then the simulation can be used. It can be used as well, because these things, the antenna is going to be 10 or 12 feet wide.
Oh, they're on booms, they're 6-foot booms, so you 6-foot booms going in 3 directions, 3 axes.
No, the actual antenna.
Oh, an antenna, you might have 3 antennas that might be 8 feet at the most, and they're gonna be a foot wide. And the other antenna are gonna be usually between 2 and 4 feet tall, again, about 12, 15 inches wide. So the antennas are not it's the fact that they sit on a boom that comes out from the monopole. And in 3 different azimuths, basically.
Okay.
So.
So does that make sense?
Makes sense to me.
3 6s, and then on the other day, on the odd days,
Yeah.
the Friday, Mondays, we go with the single boom.
In terms of the color, I know it does say highly colored, which I'm not sure what that really means in the code. But it sounds like the purpose of this is to see what it would be like, kind of simulate the view of how wide it would be. Do you want the color of the balloon to be similar to the tower then? Now, we would have trouble. You would have trouble
Seeing it in the field.
seeing it, but that just makes it consistent instead of showing a red balloon. and
because
now
you-
thinking,
I think the point is to spot it,
Yeah.
to be able to put it in space
Yeah.
for not only us.
I bet, yeah, but,
But for the public.
okay.
And the balloons, I mean,
Yeah.
it's gotta be maximum visibility, right? I
Yeah.
mean, because the tower is going, the tower is gonna be another 150 feet that you're not gonna see, it's just, so I would think.
I would just repeat that the balloon is not representative of the tower. The purpose is to be able to spot it. I would go with bright red and not deviate from that.
Right. In addition, sometimes red isn't always available, but like a bright orange or just some visible color that would not blend in, that would be
Yeah,
acceptable.
Orange would work. I've never had a problem getting red.
Yeah,
Orange.
it's rare, but it's happened like once.
Yeah.
I just want to cover
The
the
problem
base.
the problem with orange or any balloon is you fill it, it's a nice bright color in the package, you fill it, it becomes
Yeah.
somewhat
Yeah.
transparent.
Yeah.
So red
Yeah.
would be the best, because the code, I think, just says brightly
Do red.
colored. If orange were what you had,
Yeah.
is all you could get, I don't think.
Well, at 6 foot, we're gonna have to order it anyway, so it just matters what we
So-
can find.
I want to make sure I understand and the board as well. So we're doing it at 145 feet. The simulation, you'll be able to simulate lower,
Yes,
higher.
Yeah, we can go lower, higher, but doesn't matter.
yes.
Talk to me about the 20 feet extra as of right.
I'm going to.
Explain it to everybody
I'm
first.
going to make it clear I'm not an attorney. My understanding just from experience, and you know, Dave, you may feel free to correct me on this. This is only experience, is that FCC regulations allow the applicant to extend the height of the tower by up to 20 feet without further local approval.
It's more than 20 feet, actually. It's 20 feet plus the height of the antenna.
So it's 4 feet.
So the reason,
Number
the
4
reason is that the most important single reason for it, I think there's a couple of reasons, but it's mostly co-location. In other words, if they build a 145-foot tower and then somebody else comes along, AT&T comes along or whatever and wants to use it, they have the right to go up. I believe it's 20 feet clear of the top of the antenna, plus the AT&T antenna or whatever it is can go, that's the lower part of it, so it could be functionally 25 feet higher,
25 feet
yeah,
high.
I mean, you guys may have more experience in that, but it's pretty substantial.
So they can just build that, or do they have to come back?
I don't want to offer an opinion.
I mean,
It's not my
They
area
have
of
to come back,
expertise.
but you can't deny it.
Yeah,
but
yeah,
They have to come back.
They gotta show it to us, and we gotta.
That's why
poke
I'm-
at it.
yeah.
There's very limited, there's a very limited ability for us, for the board to deny it. That's.
So what's the
But they
possible?
need a reason for doing it. They need
AT&T
to
wants to-
demonstrate a reason.
But what it would come down to, I think, is that if another provider wanted to build, and was able to make the case that at 120 feet, that they didn't have significant coverage to cover their gaps. It's the same analysis that were being showed here by Verizon, they come in with the same thing. They'd say, we can't do it at 120, we need the 160 level. And that's when it would happen. And that's what I'm just I don't do this, this particular area a lot, but as I'm reading the regulation, that's what I'm projecting would happen. Scott may be able to.
So are we essentially approving, I'm being devil's advocate here, are we essentially approving a 170-foot tower or 144, 5 foot? I mean, is that the sort of implication?
Well, you're approving 145 feet, but if something, there's a contingency over which we have little control, but
With an option to add 25 feet.
Put it this way. I look, seeker. Does allow for and arguably require a look at a reasonable worst case scenario. And I would throw it out to people that know more about what happens in the business, but based on the regulation. Again, I don't know what the other providers are going to do, what they're going to want to do, and whether 120 would solve their problems, but we're looking at potentially another 20-25 feet.
That height.
Scott, you have the ability, Verizon has the ability to refuse a co-location request, doesn't it?
Well, we do, but we wouldn't,
Have you ever
because
had,
that's unusual. The whole point of co-location is to avoid the unnecessary proliferation of towers. So if we said to someone that came in, we're not gonna let you put your antennas on this tower, they'd come back and say, that's fine, we'll come to the town, build another tower. So it's not like we just think that that's a good thing for everybody. And yes, we get money for it, but that's not how we make our money. We care less about doing it.
so you have no control over what somebody wants to use your tower for?
Well, we do. I shouldn't say that. We do. I was answering the question of, we just wouldn't deny them, but if they say, well, we want to raise it by 20 feet, yeah, I think it becomes a little different then, because we probably have, I don't think we deny them necessarily. It's like, hey, if you want to pay the cost of it, do what the work is, that's fine. However, one thing to your point, that law has been in effect since 2012. And we've never, ever, and it's like, we don't come to the town and say we need 145 and then get the approval and say, oh, no, we're going up higher. We don't do that. We come here, and I can't speak to whatever the carriers. I've never done that with Verizon in the 12 years that the law has been in existence. And I recommend to my client, we would never do that because.
Well, I understand that, but it does mean that in years down the
possible.
track, you could.
Yes, sir.
need
Yeah,
to do it.
absolutely.
And we can require simulations at this point. I just want, when you say you mean you've never gone into a town with somebody else's tower and asked to put one up 20 feet above where they are?
No, so I've never been involved with that situation. However, I'm sure it's happened because sometimes the towers are low. But what I'm trying to say is, because some towns think we'll come in and ask for 145, but we really need 165. So some people will think, well, we're just gonna get the approval for 145 and then come in and say, no, we're going 165. We didn't do that. In fact, the RF analysis shows that while 165 is slightly better for us, it's not worth it. I mean, we would have applied for 165 if we needed 165.
So you're only talking, it's only a co-locator. Typically, a co-locator is gonna want some other position within the 145 feet to put their additional equipment. They have the ability, if they can prove to you or who, that it doesn't work for them at 145, that they have to go another.
Yeah, but they can't go 145, they're there.
Yeah.
They'd be.
It would be low. It's either the 10 feet below, or for some reason 135. I'm sorry, it's really what. Yeah, 10 feet below, or they have to go higher, and we would say, well, it's our tower, why do you want to go higher? So we would ask for some type of proof, and then they do have to come to you. Again, it's 60 days, you have to approve, and you can't deny them under federal law. It's just the way it is, but they still have demonstrated need.
Yeah,
to you.
demonstration.
Okay.
So how does that happen? If you have 145 and you decide you need to add on, do they put another 20 feet on top?
Yeah, you usually go in sections, you can add it on, that they're modular that way, you know.
So they need to prove a need, even if they have the as of right.
They do, yeah.
What was this, some midnight deal that somebody made?
Well, I'll just say this, it was part of the 2002 middle class tax relief.
2012?
What's that?
2012?
What did I say, 2002? Sorry.
Two thousand
It's
twelve.
part of the 2012 Middle Class Job Creation Act. That's the act. But at the end, some people got that in there.
Telecommunications facilities have been favored at the federal level. The Telecommunications Act was 96, this one was 2012, you know.
The federal government wants them built, that they're deemed critical infrastructure under presidential decree, when George Bush was the president. So they want them, they're important.
It's the flip side of using cell phones for nearly all communication, so.
So let me come back to Matt. Matt, what else do you want to tell the board? So that-
Well, as far as the activities on the day of the balloon test, places to visit, the key places, that I'll backtrack a little bit. Two things that the applicant must comply with. One is the town code, which we've talked about. And the other is the DEC policy on visual assessment. And that really spells out what are you looking for in the field, which very simply, you need to, and you have identified visually sensitive resources of statewide significance. Visual impact is identified by places of aesthetic importance to the general public, such as the state park or the designated scenic byway, or places listed on the National Register. So prior to the balloon test, you would map those places, and those places, to the extent that they're open to the public. Most of the time, a National Register structure is not open to the public. But at least we would know where those are, and to the extent that they are available to visit, you would visit them and document the visibility. Using your viewshed map as a guide. So the first thing is, the town has put out a request to interested parties, interested agencies, asking for assistance in identifying those places. Tectonic has done your homework to identify those places, put them all on a map, and that becomes your roadmap during the balloon test. So Tectonic has put together a viewshed map identifying the geographic area where visibility of the balloon, of the tower, is likely. Red on this map is what is referred to as the bare earth condition. That is, if there were no trees and no buildings, screening by topography only, the red area would indicate where you would have a line of sight to the tower. So any area on here that does not have a color is screened by topography. So during the balloon test, there is no value in looking at visually sensitive resources or other vantage points that are outside of the colored area. It's simply going to be screened by a hill or a mountain. And that is virtually 100% certain. The data is that good that the hill is there, the mountain is there. Don't spend your time looking at places like that. The red area, that assumes that that's an area where there's a line of sight to the tower, assuming no vegetation or buildings. So it's a low probability that the tower will be seen in the red. Generally, the common question is, well, doesn't that represent leaf off conditions? And the answer is no, not really, because of course, trees and leaf off conditions still provide a substantial visual barrier, particularly at great distance. The greater the depth of the forest between you and the subject, the less likely you are to see it. So when you're in close proximity to the tower during leaf off condition, yes, you're probably going to have a filtered view. When you're a mile away, probably not. So you might want to, as you're driving around during the balloon test, just make note of, are there any places in the red area here where the balloon could be visible? That would be your filtered visibility area, but that's low probability. So that leaves the yellow area on the map. That is the area of likely visibility. That's what we refer to as the land cover viewshed area. meaning it factors in vegetation and buildings. And if there's no vegetation and buildings in the way, then you have a clear line of sight over the tops of trees or through gaps in the trees to the tower or the balloon. So that's the area where the investigation on the day of the balloon test.
But
should
Matt,
focus.
that red, clearly the red covers a good chunk of the territory there. And there's a lot of assumptions that go into that red. That's, the assumption is that essentially vegetation is gonna be pretty effective to block it. And it raises all kinds of questions. I mean, we can have confidence in the accuracy of the topography estimate, but when it comes to vegetation, doesn't it raise the question, how accurate is the whatever estimates or whatever projections or information they're using? I mean, if, you know, if somebody's cleared the trees 5 years before, is it gonna be there? They're clearly, I mean, don't we, my point is, don't we really have to kick the tires pretty hard on the red area to make sure that it's, that they're accurate?
That would be one of the tasks during the balloon test, is to ground truth the accuracy of the view shed. More sets of eyes driving with this map and looking in the direction of the balloon, the better. If you're driving through the red area and you simply don't see it because of the trees, then you can conclude that the view shed is highly accurate. Now, one thing the applicant did since the last meeting was develop this view shed using LiDAR data for representation of the risk area, which is highly accurate. And LiDAR is really good for this purpose. For those that don't know, LiDAR is a point cloud source of data, millions and millions of light pulses that bounce off the ground, bounce off trees, and give you a very good representation of the landscape. What LiDAR is good for in view shed is if LiDAR is flown during leaf-off conditions, that pulse of light may actually enter the tree canopy before it hits a branch and returns. So LiDAR is going to underestimate the height of the tree. It's generally not going to pick that top branch. It's going to be something lower, generally 5 to 10 feet lower is what I've found. So the view shed may overestimate the area of visibility simply because LiDAR thinks the tree line is lower than it is. That is much more effective and accurate than just using a land cover data source to identify forest areas and then just assuming the forest is 50 feet, 60 feet for a different land cover type, 40 feet. That's kind of old school visual assessment. LiDAR was a game changer in giving you much more accurate data. You're not just assuming that a tree is 60 feet. The LiDAR is telling you that tree is 60 feet and an acre away, the trees are 50 feet. It's actually giving you the real height of those trees, less whatever that light pulse return was. So the trees are probably about 10 feet taller than the LiDAR says. So when you're looking at this, it's a good overestimation of where you should see it from. So when you go out and drive around in these yellow areas, you're very likely to see the balloon. And when you're in the red areas, you're unlikely to see the balloon. And when you're in the areas with no color, you absolutely are not going to see them.
Peter and Helena and Dave had come up with a listing of locations, and I think I'm going to give this, pass this out. Matt, hard to read. I know you like 12 point, you can't see it. Matt, you looked at this, right? And let's wait till it goes around. You had some reaction to it. You had some reaction to it. You had some recommendations. Have you seen this, Scott?
Yeah.
It was in the-
Yeah,
it was in the
somebody
memo.
sent it over to me.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, who did?
So Scott, you,
You know them?
Oh,
Peter?
No, I'm good. I have it. The map that you have, that you were showing with the visual view shed. What is that from their application?
This is Tectonics map.
And what is that one called? Is it
You should not.
you said map?
Yes,
Submitted
it's
that
submitted
one.
electronically.
I did submit it and I'm looking for the date period. It was February 20th. I sent it over. That was a cover letter.
Scott, was it to me, just to me, or was it to the whole group?
I used the group email where I
Yeah,
think it was as
go
many
ahead.
as, I think so. I think it was
It
everybody.
was everybody.
And
Well,
I
let's-
went definitely to you with the group, I believe.
Helena, did you get this, Peter?
I'm trying to.
There's, I believe, they were on it, but.
And I'm sorry, somebody asked a question when I went off on a tangent about the bare earth condition and the future potential for somebody clearing their lot, creating a new view. That's not something that we can account for. Because we don't know where in this area that might occur. Certainly, it's going to occur somewhere. Probably in many places. However, simply clearing a lot is not necessarily going to open a view. If you're in this red area and you clear your lot, it does not mean that you are now going to see the tower, because there's still going to be trees adjacent to your lot causing screening. So there's no way to predict that. So we can only deal with the here and now based on the most current LiDAR data available.
What does the documentation, how does the documentation happen of the day of the test?
I can't speak for Tectonic's process, but what I do is I will program into a georeferenced app on my phone this map and all of the places that I intend to visit. And I will navigate around, and on my phone, I can see exactly where I am. I can see whether I am in the land cover view shed or out of the land cover view shed. That's how I know to look and see, do I have a view of the balloon? Is the view shed accurate? But it also navigates me right to the suggested photo point. And then I can get there and do some field adjustment. Maybe there's a tree, a road sign, something else in my way that was not predicted. I can step aside. And then I will document that exact photo point with a handheld GPS. The camera I use also has an internal GPS. And I will also photograph my handheld GPS. So I have a triple backup of exactly where I took that photo from. So that's the documentation.
And then that all gets compiled into a.
It gets
a visual
compiled
reference.
into a photo log. Those photo points are mapped here. And then the methodology summarized in the summary visual assessment report.
I'm guessing that when you do the public notifications, you give coordinates as part of that public.
No, typically what I see, you could do it any way you want. Give the location of the tower, so the general public knows where it is, which probably would be a street address. You could give a coordinate.
I was just thinking, because everyone's got a phone, so it's
Yeah.
easy to put it in there and then point your phone and.
Yeah, I've never seen the view shed map referenced in a public notice. I guess you could reference people where it's posted on the town website. Not something I know to be common.
Matt, you made some recommendations to me at some point, or suggestions as to the list. Did you cull the list already, or that's what you're gonna recommend to us?
I would recommend calling the list, and I think the folks at State Parks, PIPC, I'm not sure who else you reached out to, identified places that they thought would be good to stop at. Some of them I did, to the best of my ability, tried to plot. And a lot of the trail locations in the park were nondescript to me, not having hiked those trails, to know whether there just might be, you come around a corner and you've got a sweeping view, that's where they're talking about. That would be really hard to, for me to interpret based on what the commenter, how the commenter was describing that point. But I think the only way to do that would be to hike the trail and try to find the point that was being requested if it is not self-evident. But I would cull the list by anything that falls outside of the bare earth view shed. If it falls behind a hill, it's not worth visiting. And the commenter wouldn't necessarily know that unless they were looking at the view shed map diligently when they were suggesting points for us to look at. So that would be my first level is, let's not go on a wild goose chase looking for places that the desktop research tells us will not be effective.
Remember, the benefit of the notice to the public is that no matter, regardless of the particular points that we show the most interest in, that we want the applicant to be very careful that they photograph and check out and everything like that. People can drive all over the town, that balloon's gonna be visible, and that's the best way to ground truth this, is that, you know, if 10 people are driving around the town on these 2 days, you're gonna get a lot more data points in terms of, if they've missed something, you know, the likelihood is somebody's gonna find it driving, especially if it's an important spot like on 209 or 44 or something like that, you know.
And if it does perchance that we were unaware of something and someone took a photo, send us the photos.
That's-
We can include that in our photo log.
That's absolutely the goal here, is we, you know, we're requiring them to do certain things in the simulations, but the whole purpose of getting the public involved is to ground truth that with everybody's activity and the boards as well. If you suspect there's something you want to see,
I mean,
that's not one of these things, just go drive, you know, for an hour and you'll catch a lot.
to answer your question, being very familiar with Minnewaska, I would say there are those viewpoints where you come around a corner and it will be visible, you know.
If you want.
And, but that's something I think that, you know, we could work with Parks on to get out to those points, or I got to
I
them or
would say
bike out to.
Tectonic at least would be extremely grateful if that could be handled by people who knew the area, because we don't.
Well, yeah, I mean, that's the reason why this list that, you know, we created is probably a little bit more comprehensive, is that we made the assumption, you guys are not from here,
Mhm.
we are.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And there are people that know it better
Trails.
than I do in the park, because they work there or, you know, or hike there regularly. And also people, we got suggestions from the public that were very informative, and so it all becomes part of the reference.
I just have two things. One, on those trails, and I did put it in my email, I don't know the condition of the trails. I know I've been hiking and conditions aren't really real beneficial to hiking, you know, they have been recently very icy.
Yeah.
Weird conditions in some places I've been where you fall down 6 inches. I don't know what they call that. We're not gonna send Tectonic out to some place that we think is, or that they think is dangerous. It's up to them. They can do what they want to do. But we just want to make sure that their safety is paramount.
The majority of the sites that are located in Minnewaska that we referenced are carriageways, carriage
Okay.
roads,
So,
or off carriage roads, or.
Yeah,
just
some on the single track. but
Yeah, some of
by-
them
by
are.
March,
But, you know, some of the ones
Oh,
that are
you've
listed
skied
as
in
Mohawk.
March.
what's that?
I've skied
Yes,
in March.
yeah.
I hope to ski in March.
Well,
You're technically not supposed to walk those trails
Yeah.
if they're open to skiing.
They're not
Well,
open now.
Jenny Lane.
that's
If
what I was
we're
trying.
talking mid-March.
Yeah, they might well.
The biggest storms I've seen in my 30-something
Yeah.
years here have been March. It,
So
I had a question about, Matt, you had referenced National Register sites. The town has a plethora of National Register sites. They're largely stone colonial farmsteads. They're not on the list, are they?
No.
Well, let me give you.
And they're listed mostly because of their architectural uniqueness.
Yes.
So what are we expected to, are they expected to, I mean, there are literally 24.
Yeah.
Yeah, the sites on here were all visual references, not historical, and so that's a big caveat.
Yeah,
There was-
the original version of the DEC policy, visual policy that came out in 1999 simply referenced sites listed or eligible for listing on the National Register of Historic Places. When they updated that document in 2019, they added the caveat that places that are open for public visitation. So that immediately takes most National Register or register eligible sites out of the mix. Doesn't mean those homeowners couldn't have a heightened sensitivity. And the DEC policy is looking out for the citizens of New York State as a whole. But it does not mean that the town would not be sensitive to the interest of their own residents. So it doesn't mean you don't look at places that are not open to public visitation. Obviously, you don't trespass on anybody's property. You may visit the public right of way in front of that property to get a sense of, is the view shed accurate? If there's a view from the roadside, document that. But National Register eligible sites, if you follow the letter of the DEC policy, it's not really considering private places.
So private Stonehouse would not be included, but like the Ulster County Historic Society would be.
Yes.
Okay,
Yes, and um,
For the whole of the hamlet.
The what did?
I was saying, we're sitting in the hamlet of Acorn, which is.
Historic.
Yeah, so
I think you're,
Publicly accessible.
you're also kind of crossing over into what you've been referring to as the NEPA analysis, or the section 106 historic analysis, where you will need to get a letter of concurrence from, and again, I'm crossing over out of my area, so Scott, help me out. But you will need to get a letter of concurrence from SHPO that there is no effect on historic resources. And they will be interested in those National Register and Register eligible sites, regardless of public visitation. National Register sites, and Dave, you are absolutely correct. National Register sites can be listed or eligible for listing on several criteria. One is the character of the architecture, the history of the people that lived there. One of the criteria that you rarely see is the quality of the view. Down here, the classic example of a place that is uniquely important because of the quality of the view is the Olana State Historic Site. That's there, was built there by Frederick Church because of the view. That is a very unique and doesn't apply to most National Register sites. Most of it is the uniqueness of the architecture or the history that is associated with the property, which has very little to do with the aesthetic quality of the view from that property.
I just want to back up a little and say also that this is a seeker review, and there's some flexibility in this. If this hamlet, for example, is one of the centerpieces of the town, regardless of whether there's any historic buildings here, but it's where people are, it's important. And whether or not it's even one of the listed sites that would again, if people have pictures of the balloon in Accord, and you can submit that, we can evaluate it. And, and this board can determine whether that becomes an important thing in terms of a significant adverse impact on the town.
Right.
The DEC guidance is very, very valuable because it gives us standardized procedures for getting this data and for evaluating it, but it's flexible and we can go beyond that and as long as we can document the importance of it. And the point is to get the data first and then we can, if it's just one such site, maybe not, but if there's 5 or 6 or 7 sites where people gather that are important for passersby or whatever, for the town itself, we can look at that and take it into account on that basis. And the applicant can give us their opinion as to whether what we're doing is correct, but we can certainly move in that direction and ultimately evaluate it under the law. So I want to emphasize that, seeker is an inherently flexible thing. It's not trivial, we can't just based on trivialities, but if there's something important going on, let's get the data, let's have people driving around, see the balloon wherever it is, kick the tires on the map simulation and we'll go from there.
So,
I'm sorry.
okay,
I was gonna say on that issue, that's totally fine. We obviously have to live up to certain standards using full frame equivalent 50mm lens. Most people are gonna take it with their cell phone, tiny sensor, so I mean, I'm not gonna submit you the, metadata for that. Should people be required to do that as
My
a,
point
so
is,
we can,
if somebody sees a balloon, even with a whatever camera.
yeah,
Where maybe we haven't projected it or asked to do simulation, then we turn around and say, you know what, this is town hall's an important place,
yeah.
simulate it. Here, it's simulated at 145 feet using.
Can we do that with our modeling that we've got? Like if you haven't taken a picture of that balloon after it's.
Yes, if I know what camera it was taken with. And I know where the person was standing when the photo was taken. Yes, it could be simulated.
Everybody's listening, write it down.
Or we can take it with a 50mm lens and a.
Yes. Is that
Okay.
And just let us know the camera, because if you're using
Yeah.
an APS-C camera, it's gonna be usually 1.5, 1.6 crop factor, whatever, blah, blah, blah.
I know somebody who can do that.
Or, but I know, and I'm only saying that because I know it's. You
I mean,
kind of looking like, well, people won't have that, but if
And
we're gonna be
I
held to that
have-
standard, that's the standard.
Appreciate that.
I have done simulations from cell phones. Granted, they're more modern ones, like the latest and greatest, whatever model it is. Those generally tend to do better just because they take higher resolution photos and they're somewhat less fisheyeing. And because that honestly is the hardest part to reflect in a simulation is the fisheye effect from a cell phone camera. That's the effect that it would have on the tower, because it warps it, so a tree that would normally be straight up, fisheye effect.
So in
makes
other
it
words,
turn.
I'd be interested in whether the person could just verify that the balloon was visible from a certain spot. You're interested in exactly what the picture looks like in the
Yes.
simulation.
Yeah, I have to match the conditions of that surrounding
So
area.
let me just,
Can I ask
yes, go ahead.
a question? And what would prevent you, say, a member of the public takes a photo from some location that we haven't flagged? What would prevent you from traveling to that location and using the correct camera after the?
As long as we
We
have
have
the
to
location.
remobilize,
Yeah,
we have to redo the balloon test, wait for.
No,
the-
no, no.
Oh, you
No,
mean like,
that
Just
was
to
the
set up
one.
camera.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, what's that?
We just need to know the
Oh,
location.
okay, for model purposes? Okay.
For the purpose
Yeah,
of
I
the
just, I don't know, can you do it?
Yeah.
We could with Peter's 50 millimeter.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I mean, I've already, because that's
You can get
essentially
a lot
how
of
we
phone
did
calls.
the simulations we initially
Fine.
provided. Is we went out to certain locations, took a photo at where the tower would be. And then using the LiDAR and ground data, I was able then to mock up to say, hey, this is where the tower is, and obviously there is a big fat building or a hill or whatever it is that would be intervening between.
So if we had some number of locations that were not identified in advance.
Yeah.
Of the balloon test, we could provide those to you and be able to simulate.
Yeah, I mean, as much information as can be provided from about those photos, like the cameras. The camera make, model, lenses, etc. Which if it's a DSLR of some sort, typically that is included in the metadata of the photos already. So unless that's been essentially stripped out, most of that I would be able to get from the photo itself. In which case I would just need to know the location. And ideally how tall a person is, but you know, I could
So-
fit some, I can make some assumptions.
So Matt, what are the next steps? We have a list here of the sites that were recommended, combination of people around this table. Members of the public, PIPC, other groups.
I would endeavor to plot all of those on the view shed map, so we know where they are.
Who's doing that? These guys?
That would be the typical.
Yeah.
Process.
Which we pretty much got the initial locations that were provided to us. Plotted already, but so I need to go through and do some revisions for like the sites.
Okay, so-
Remove the sites that,
That's the next step. Next,
Yeah, that I would provide that map to the town in
Mhm.
advance, so that at least. Myself and anybody on the board that wants to navigate from it, even better if you can provide it in the GeoTIFF format,
I could do Google Earth KMZ.
could do that.
Okay,
okay, so once we have,
So, I'm sorry, is this stuff be called though? Did you mentioned that the list?
yes, that list does still need to be.
Okay, so is the town gonna go, are the planning board gonna go through that?
well, so I asked that before, I thought, Matt, you said it was cold already.
Oh,
Sorry?
Was that map?
No, I would say the first level of culling is if it falls. Out of the bare earth view shed, it is screened by a hill. I would just remove it from the list.
So how do we know that?
It's the
Based
color.
on, based on the view
Yes.
shed. If it's not in the red or the yellow,
so you got.
But who's gonna, but who's gonna?
Okay. Yeah, sorry,
who's
make sorry.
gonna- saying who's gonna figure out which of these is in the gray?
I could send you a KMZ file of the original. I've already got most of them plotted
You're
anyway.
gonna send us what?
I could send you Google Earth, you know,
A map,
A map.
we'll plot it on a map, kind of like what you have in front of you,
Right,
you know.
And
so-
superimpose your colors?
yeah, I could do
Yeah,
that.
yeah. That way you can kind of help call it.
and so based on that list, you're gonna do something, you're gonna come back and say, these following of the 50 spots, these 5 spots. We suggest you cull for the following reasons, is that what you're gonna do?
I mean, I think if it falls within the area that the map says it's not gonna be visible from, sure, we'll do that.
Yeah,
I have a comment before we start going on. On the first map that you have provided, the Bare Earth map that Matt Allen has discussed, showed the planning board. You have a 1 mile radius. Due south of where the proposed location, probably 1.1 miles is where one of the scenic overlooks are.
Yeah.
Can you just expand that view a little bit more? Because it's really just, it's at the bottom of the page. And it would be helpful, I mean, number
Talk
one,
about
it's
the two
the
scenic overlooks,
Hmm?
the two scenic overlooks.
Yes, and you don't see it on this 1 mile, it's like
Yeah.
1.1 mile, the second sheet. You know, where you go out 2 miles,
Yeah.
but it's just right outside of that, and it would be nice to have the resolution on sheet 1. If you could just, you
Yeah,
didn't
I can
crop
send
it,
down. I mean,
Okay.
I can move it up. some.
yeah, that would be great, because those two scenic overlooks are very important. And, you know, they are,
Yeah, which we've already got both of those
Right.
overlooks marked.
and you're not
Right.
gonna have any topography between that and the tower, there's, vegetation is not gonna play a role here.
Yeah, I mean, I've already done the Sims and
Yeah,
we know
okay.
it's
All right.
visible, so.
But
So
it would
that-
be
done.
helpful to see that.
Done. That's done. Going back, you're gonna take this list, you're gonna project it on the map. And then you can make some assumptions based upon what you know about topography and everything else. You're gonna identify those points that you believe should be culled because it's on the other side of the ridge. For
Sure,
example, you can do that.
yes, we will do that.
Is that?
Yeah.
And then what are we doing about something that might be on this list, but it's 3 miles out? Or
That's what I was gonna ask, because after 3 miles, I mean, my experience and actually, you can look it up, but your eye can really only see about 3 miles. Give or take, I mean, you can see farther than that, but in terms of resolving power, I don't know if that's kind of your experience, but.
In my experience, it's very difficult to detect a typical cell tower beyond 2 miles. Particularly if you're above it looking down and there's landscape behind it. If it's skylining above a ridge, it's gonna be more distinct. But you know, I don't know if there's any place within the park where you would not be looking down at it. I think the two overlooks on 4455 are gonna tell us a lot because that's the closest place just outside the park.
Yeah.
Where that type of view would exist. So that would be the most exposed, closest view from something similar to what you would see in the park. So your simulations there are gonna tell us a lot about how much you can see when you're even further away.
All right, so
But
what
I think we ought to pick a reasonable distance. Some of the places that were recommended in the park were well more than 3 miles, maybe closer to 5 miles. Do we want to,
why don't we be, all right, so anything on the other side of the bridge, you can't see it. Why don't we just say anything more than 3 miles? Not 2.
I would agree with that. I don't want to be
3, I think, is-
disrespectful of the folks at the park because that's a very important resource.
Yeah.
But I do think that, you know, given that, you know, it's just kind of like filling balloons with helium. Every mile you go farther than that, you're exponentially increasing your study area. So unless there's anything of high value, maybe the one, I'm not sure how far the visitor center point
That's the
is.
one I was gonna
That's
say.
the
That may be one that is
That's
easy
good
to get
5
to.
miles.
It's, you can drive right up there.
Yeah.
Yeah,
But I think that's a crucially important,
2.7 miles away.
which one is that one? I'm
The
sorry.
visitor center. The visitor center.
Yeah, that one's.
According to Google
it's-
Maps.
The hardest ones, I think,
Which one?
that will be. one of
Yeah,
the
but
ones that are
The
saying-
visitor center is Minnewaska.
The waterfall. Those are the ones that
Main
will
entrance up top, up the lake.
essentially, I'll be completely honest, will be
Yeah,
assistance
it's
with.
over there.
With say weather.
The trail locations, like the physically on, like the trailhead, not trailheads, the carriage trails and things like that. Those are the ones that we're gonna need the most assistance with, because we're not familiar with those trails.
Well, I think we can work that out.
Yeah,
Yeah.
The parks have, they would provide.
All right, so
Yes, locations, I
So-
believe.
let's make it on the other side of the bridge, you can't see it because it's on the other side of the bridge. And anything more than 3 miles. Can you talk to the folks at Minnewaska? You seem to be the closest to them, Helena. About the 3 mile, I mean, if they say no, 3.5, 4 miles,
Okay.
yeah, I guess so, but 3 miles. Seems to be what our expert is saying is reasonable.
I can reach.
So it's really 2 things that get culled. You can't see it because it's on the other side of the bridge.
Well, yeah, no, that makes, I mean,
Right.
And
that's-
anything beyond 3 miles, I'd like to know specifically, do they still want it to be done?
okay,
All right,
we may have to put that in writing to Laird.
so would you talk to him? Yeah, if he needs it in writing, we'll put it in writing.
Okay. I had a question.
Oh,
When they do
hang on one
close-
second, Colleen.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Absolutely.
Okay, so 3 miles, yeah, inside 3 miles, yes. Outside of that, we need to ask, it's mostly Minnewaska that has proposed those.
Yeah.
We're gonna ask them about those sites.
No, I'll spend Mohawk.
Even still.
Mohawk is even further.
Yeah.
Yeah,
they had
Mohawk,
two.
I don't think Mohawk is even.
And Best Buy.
They had like two
Named after the
locations they
preserve, but
requested.
the parts on the ridge.
There were two.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They're-
So I mean, if they want to go up there and take photos the day of
but these
and
are-
send it to us, we'll be more than happy to include it, but
All
it's
right,
a
so that's-
long way away.
Helena, if you have another question, then I want to get to,
Yes, I
what do
do.
we do with all this data when we gather it all?
When you do your photo simulations, are we going to see, obviously, there'll be a simulation of the tower, the monopole. But will we also see a simulation of, let's say, a camouflage pole with evergreen or,
We can do whatever y'all request.
okay, when would we be requesting that in a photo simulation?
At any point in time. I mean, initially we just start with whatever is actually planned,
Okay,
just so you can see
okay,
this is
then
what
the
it
next
looks like.
phase would
And
be.
then
if-
any
if-
revisions from there on out,
Okay.
whether it be higher.
So Helena, you're
lower.
asking for a simulation with a Frankenpole?
Yeah.
A Frankenpole?
But I don't know when, I'm asking when does that come
Okay,
into play?
that's great.
Matt, do you have a feeling about the Frankenpine?
Yes, I do.
Yeah.
What is that?
He just said it.
Well, because our town code also does discuss concealment methods and things of that
Specifically?
nature,
Oh,
so.
okay. Yeah.
That can be a very effective mitigation technology for structures that are somewhat close to the height of the surrounding vegetation. If it's significantly taller than the surrounding vegetation, it can actually increase visual
The
impact
visibility, that's
because
true.
it's a greater mass.
Yeah.
If it's the only evergreen in a forest of
Deciduous.
things, yeah, then it sticks out like sore thumb.
I know, I had to ask the question.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just
Well,
because
of course, that
of, because of the town code.
So what do we do with all this data that we're gonna be gathering? All these pictures that come from 50 millimeters?
As long as request that if associate a photo with a location for it. If we have that,
A geolocation, a
geolocation would be
first oak
preferred.
tree on the left, what kind of?
Geolocation would be preferred, lat long decimal,
Yeah.
that would be preferred.
Okay,
Which Google Maps, you could just do a pin and there you go, there's your photo
Probably
location.
need citizen advice on how to do this.
Well, if they don't know how to do that, just a street address, where were you?
We gotta
Here's in
tell-
front.
My point is, we have to describe to them what
Mhm.
we're recommending they do,
Mhm.
With a
not
Google
case
pin
by
mark?
case,
Google
like
pin.
proactively with.
Google Pen would probably be the
That's the easy thing
easiest
to do,
then.
drop
Yeah.
a Google pin.
That's all you have to do is
The
just.
closer, the better.
Yeah.
So what, I'm not sure if this addresses your question.
People on their own there, they-
Once we
just
get
talked
the
about-
balloon test completed, and then they have to do their simulation work, you will be provided then with basically another visual analysis, but with these locations. We provided you one visual analysis of a bunch of locations that look pretty good. So, but this will enhance that one
So,
or supplement it.
You're talking about a photo log.
yes, a photo log.
Yeah.
So
Which sometimes what we do is we provide that before we do any simulations. So that way y'all can say this location, that location, I wanna see that.
I think we're sim in every location.
Yeah,
Okay,
yeah, which probably gonna end up simming every location, but sometimes it's not necessary.
okay,
Yeah.
all right. So Matt, do we need to decide anything else tonight to get rolling here?
I can't think of anything.
All right, so I have one, go ahead, Jennifer.
When you speak with Minnewaska, if they have sites outside of the 3 mile radius that they're very concerned about, it could be useful to take a photo and prove that you can't see it during the balloon test.
I would agree.
Just as
I would
it
agree
would be
with that.
useful to show that you can see
Yeah, I
it.
would agree with that.
Not that we want to expand the whole radius, we recognize that that's a lot of extra effort, but if there's something in particular.
If they insist that they want it, then we're gonna do it. Absolutely.
It's an important resource that we have to consider.
If they have a sincere belief that there is a possibility of a view.
We
I
should
should
do it.
visit it. A lot of times, when you put out a letter asking for this information, folks don't know how to read a view shed map really, so they may in good faith give you a place that really has no chance of a view. So we just want to be sure that our time is well spent on the day of the balloon test.
We did work with the Saratoga folks, the park, escaping me
State
now.
park.
What's it?
Saratoga Historic.
Historic,
State
we,
Park.
yeah, I gave us a tour too, it was really cool, but anyway, And so in a case like that, if they're insistent, just have a representative meet with us and say, okay. Please take us to the location that you're, or locations that you're concerned with, and we'll, if that insistent, we'll take a picture.
Okay,
And
so,
we do it, we like to validate that it's not visible as much as if it's visible, because then we can prove to people. Well, was it visible here? Yeah, here's a picture.
Right.
See, so a lot of times in these reports, you have more pictures where it's not visible. That's usually what happens with these types of towers. So that's important to us too.
Yeah,
So we're gonna-
you could in a photo log, if all you have are photographs of where the balloon could be seen, you could have 50 photographs. And it's going to lead the reader to believe that it was visible from everywhere. Because it simply was not documented. If you look at this map, it's probably visible from no more than 10% of the 1 mile radius. But if all you have are photographs from there, that is not going to be expressed. It could certainly be described statistically in the analysis, how much of the view shed is the land covered view shed, how much is the bare earth view shed, and how much is not visible. Statistically, you can know that, but a picture's worth 1,000 words.
so I'm gonna jump a little bit away from the visual impact for a second. One of the items that came up in speaking to some of the residents is the whole issue of and I know, Matt, it's not your expertise, so we're gonna turn to our attorney about the legal,
More free legal advice.
the legal implications of what we can, we didn't talk about it last time, but what we can and what we can't get involved in when it comes to the radio waves, the impact of radio waves from the antenna. And can you comment on that for us?
Well, if you're talking about the health impacts of radio waves.
Yeah.
Under federal law, under Telecommunications Act, man, I think I actually downloaded the law, so if I can find it, I can read it, but basically. The concept is that the purported or the suspected health impacts of the radio waves are not an appropriate issue for the planning board to consider. As long as the project stays within certain parameters that the FCC has established. I guess you could think of it as a statutory safe zone, the safe harbor, in other words, that's what we say in law school. So as long as they stay within X and Y, then essentially the issue of public safety is off the table. Now, I would ask the applicant to describe in more detail whether they meet those parameters. And I'll also point out that there were some residents that approached me after the last meeting and said that there was a recent court case and apparently a ruling that called that into question. I did not become aware of that, and I invited them to submit written information on that. So if we can get that information, that'd be helpful. But otherwise, the critical question is whether or not the proposed project stays within the white lines of the FCC's parameters that are congressionally and or administratively mandated as safe.
So those parameters, Scott, that Dave's talking about, correct me if I'm wrong, that's in terms of what range of transmission is occurring, what megahertz?
Transmission power is based upon different frequencies. PCS has a limitation of what the power frequency, what the power gain can be, et cetera. I don't know the specific details of those, but what I do know is that, again, for like 26 years I've been doing this, we never have had one that came even above 5% of what the maximum is that we can do by law. It's just science. It does, but for people that aren't aware, we have a report in tab 8 of our original application. It's by SiteSafe. It's by a New York State licensed engineer. And they confirmed that they looked at our specific antennas, and that in this case, we're like, well, I don't know if it's we're below 1%. So if we can.
So your report and what you're attesting to this board is that you're certifying that you're going to be within that safe harbor frequency. And within that safe harbor frequency, we're not able to in any way.
I downloaded the statute. So this is the Telecommunications Act. And it's section 347 USC, section 332, 7. B4 says no state government or instrumentality may regulate the placement, construction, and modification of personal wireless service facilities on the basis of the environmental effects of radio frequency emissions to the extent that such facilities comply with the commission's, meaning the FCC's, regulations concerning such emissions. So, but we need our RF engineer to essentially look at the application and confirm for us that it falls within the FCC guidelines.
Which he did.
And we are 0.23 of 1% of what we are legally permitted to use.
That's 1/40 of 1%,
So last week or 2 weeks
That's
ago,
the
we
map,
had the
yes.
RF engineer here.
Almost, yeah.
1/40.
Yeah. So
He made the point of telling us that he looked at the information you gave us and he certified that they're within the standards that are defined by the FCC.
Does it matter that there is a residential facility located, from what you told me, pretty close to this, within a couple of 100 feet? I mean,
no, because in fact, the FCC relatively recently changed how you look at this. Much more complicated. I'm not an engineer, I don't understand it, but the old rule, which is really the kind of the same as the new rule, it's just more complicated, was any antenna source that is greater than 10 meters above the ground level will never violate requirements. So as long as you're 33 feet above the ground, you never have an issue. So you can stand right under it, never an issue. The only time you have an issue is for the folks that are working on it that have to go 2 feet within it. They have to comply with OSHA guidelines and they have a limit of how much time they can be in front of it. And that's for the general public. No, this tower will never come close to violating the FCC requirements. Never, ever.
Just a question, two questions about that. Number one, I think that's one concern. There are other concerns about noise that I have about the proximity to that building, which is another concern, but I just don't want to make it seem like it's just one issue.
Sure.
The other thing is the legal case that David mentioned.
Yep.
Do you have any knowledge of that?
I do. So that legal case did not do anything except so the regulate.
you have a,
Can you
Scott, do you have
provide it
a
to
name
us?
for the case?
What's that?
You have a name?
EH. I'll have to give it to you. I think it's EHC, Environmental Health. EHF, anyway, I'll get it to you. I've read it. It was brought up in
I'll email you
litigation.
tomorrow, I want to see it.
It was brought up in litigation that I was involved with. All the case did was it remanded it back to the FCC, and the FCC recently said,
Remanded it back for different, safe harbor?
the FCC said recently they completed an analysis, a review of what the emissions were. And they came to the conclusion after a year or whatever, that there's no reason to change this, period. And so people challenged it and
And the court said do it again?
the court said, go look at it again because there was an issue with the records. They're in the process of doing it again. It took 6 years. It'll probably take another 6 years. Give or take, who knows what it'll take, but it did not undo any existing threshold
I'm gonna email you
whatsoever.
tomorrow, I want to see the
I
order.
definitely will.
Okay, so to Peter's point though about the noise, Scott, this brings up the issue of the site. And you and I did speak about this, that I believe that the antenna, the tower is gonna be within outside of the parameters of our code. The code says whatever amount of feet between side yards, apartments, buildings, whatever. I think it's within those standards, but some of the board members have gone out there, looked at the site. And we're not happy with how close it is to those apartment buildings, and so. Does it matter? Do we need to decide exactly where the tower is gonna be now in order to validate the balloon test? And if it does matter, then we need to come up with an alternative as to where the tower is gonna be located on the site.
Well, I mean, right now the tower is located where we're proposing to. I know you wanted to have a site visit. You'd have to ask, I think, your consultant, if it matters, if it was to be moved. I'm not saying it can't be moved, but the owner has told us this is what it's gotta be right now. If it was to be moved after a site visit, I don't know, does that matter in terms of the balloon test?
No,
Okay,
Not for simulations of
How
this.
far are you talking about moving it?
you'd have to ask.
It's a 20-acre site, so it would be couple of hundred, maybe
Couple hundred
400
feet.
feet.
Yeah, I mean, it's
I don't
also-
think it would impact the balloon
Yeah,
test.
as long as the location is still within the frame of the photo, I can simulate it. Because the marker balloon acts as a marker.
And you can
from there-
geolocate a different location? if-
Yeah, because I mean, everything in the model is to scale. So if I know it's 100 feet this way and this location is 3 feet lower, there we go. There's
All right,
the
so-
location of the tower.
The other issue about location is the generators.
Is the noise,
the
is
50
noise impacts on the residents.
Scott,
Yeah, well, the other.
there's
thing
gonna
that-
be a generator there that's gonna go off testing wise once a week. And that
Bi-weekly.
generator is
Yeah.
Bi-weekly, yeah, so.
twice a week. So there's also noise involved here.
I'll find out if the apartment has generators too. I don't know, so it might not, it generally is not an issue. I mean, it's
Well,
like,
the other thing, it's the winter time. Does this apartment building have playgrounds out back? Are there places where people sit? There's a barbecue pits. So there's also a visual impact from the apartment dwellers with regards to the actual tower.
And I'm
well,
also,
yeah, the people at the site will see it. There's no question about it. The people that, that are there, I mean.
well, the question is whether they just walk into the building on that side, or whether they actually recreate on that site for, if there's a, if there's a basketball court or.
There's nothing there right now, no,
Okay.
at least according to our plan.
I'm also concerned that, the separate, the horizontal separation distance in the code, also, in the code also has a vertical, limit of, what is it, 50 feet above the tree line.
Correct.
You're going, this is substantially, this is more than twice as, about twice as high, or maybe a little bit less than that, so that may change the need for a horizontal separation.
I think we're comply, I don't have my ruler with me, but I think we comply with the horizontal.
I'm saying if you do, you may, but you're going higher now, so we may need more horizontal separation in terms of just the tower being a visual intrusion.
Isn't it 110%?
Yes,
The fall range is 110%, the height of the
the
tower.
list does not include buildings.
Yeah, so we're
It
complying.
talks
with code.
about roads and property lines.
Yeah,
Oh, so it's okay to fall down on
Again,
it.
but
It's
they
literally.
don't fall down.
No, I'm just, but
It's
that's the
not-
reason.
And we've built some literally right,
Again, the
10
code
feet off
also
the-
says 95
like
feet.
there's a bar if you were driving
It
down.
says tree line.
It's a throughway, you can see the
Or
tower, and it's a bar,
150,
it's like
which is
literally.
flat.
Where?
Right, so.
Perfect.
So-
way above-
Oh, okay.
But I,
You know,
By the way, did you guys
Question.
remember, I think we asked to find out what the height of the towers are in the town of Astor?
Yeah,
Did you ever get that
I
information?
did, I'm gonna be submitting a bunch of stuff, I have it on my
Okay, let me bring everybody back to us.
150
Okay,
and 160.
Scott, we're gonna want to, we wanna set a site visit.
Yeah, Dan is contacting the owner to arrange that, we just have to tell them when, the owner will not be there. I believe he's out in New York
So who's
City.
gonna be there?
Dan will be there.
Dan's from your
Dan from
company?
Tectonic.
Tectonic.
Exactly. We don't know if we need RF there, or construction. I don't know, but if you let us know when a good time is, we just have to give the project manager, property manager know.
We'll go out this week, next week, whatever.
Just let us know.
I have a question, but a little bit of a different question.
Go ahead.
What are the implications if there are code violations out on the property at the moment?
If there's code violations?
Yeah, I don't know that there are.
I
But
don't know. I don't know.
general,
We've looked at this before, there's no, and this is something we need legislation on, but at present, I mean, code violations are the CEO's jurisdiction to go and clap them with this to write tickets or do whatever he wants to do. We're evaluating the site plan approval and doing a seeker review, so now if the code, if it was really, I mean, at some point, if it starts infringing on their ability to, comply with the rules going forward that we need, then it's an issue, but if we're just opposing site plan violations, especially if they're minor, it's really for Jerry to go out there and start writing an OV.
right, so it doesn't.
Now, we've considered because of certain issues that have popped up in the town, we've considered writing legislation and talk about that with the town, but they haven't yet, moved on any of that. Because there is a concern that people do things on the site that especially clearing the site before,
Yes,
Yeah. But we don't have that legislation.
We do not clear anything. The amount of regulation that is are on these things from the federal level with the bats and everything, we can't clear a tree without regulatory approval, so we don't do anything. On that issue, though, that we did submit a zoning review request, and the CEO did tell us what we have to do, but he didn't mention any code violations.
So You don't own the site, but you're in control of the site in terms
We
of.
have, we have a lease,
Oh, you have-
correct, we said yes.
Okay, all right. Any other questions?
Very quick question about your testing in regard to the noise. How long does the test go? It's twice a week?
It's
like 1 minute?
once every 2 weeks, I think it's right now, it's generally nationally Tuesday at 10-ish in the morning, I think it runs for 20-30 minutes or so. And it's less than a lawnmower, because I mean, people mow lawns on there, I get what you're saying, they're gonna do landscaping. They do that stuff, it
Is it
just
like a
keeps it
regular
running,
Generator
What?
or it's like?
it's 50 kilowatt generator. It'll be diesel.
Could you submit the noise specs?
Yes.
Generator?
Good question.
We have it already, I think.
And also distance to the nearest sensitive receptor?
What was that, Jennifer?
Distance to the nearest sensitive receptors, which is probably the apartments. and
Yeah,
places.
it's about 200 feet.
Yeah.
No,
and
it's-
it's-
150.
No,
So
it's
So all the Verizon generators go up at 10 o'clock on a Tuesday?
Yeah, unless they change them, yeah, they're programmed that way.
Nationwide.
Get general.
What's that?
No,
Can you hear me now?
and we'll get that information to you, but like I said, it's basically less than a lawnmower. I mean, we're talking, the way it dissipates, usually within 100 feet, you're at talking level.
It's useful to have the numbers.
I know.
so that we
Yeah.
understand
Okay.
what the
Useful
facts
for
are.
that, I get it,
Yes.
and for comparison to.
Yeah, I have a, going back to just a second to the as of height, and this might be a David Gordon question. You can add 20 feet. And on the plan, it's 170 feet plus or minus proposed tower to apartment building. So if they do 145 foot tower and then they add on top to make it a taller tower, that would be in violation of the setback, wouldn't it?
Yeah, but federal law says we can't regulate it, so we can't deny it.
That's,
So you should take that into account.
No, no, it's not, because it's, I'm sorry, it's to the building,
yeah, it says.
but
175
building is not the, it's either to the property line or the road, I don't.
The code does not mention
Yeah.
buildings,
Oh, okay, so you don't care if it falls.
which is
I
unfortunate.
mean, they don't fall,
Titanic didn't sink either.
you know? No, it's kind of exciting. I have a letter from an engineer said that properly designed towers, properly designed and constructed and maintained towers do not fall. Towers have fallen. There's, in New York, there are a few cases where the manufacturer Nudd, Fred Nudd, which no one really uses anymore, he made some defective bolts and some towers went over in Oswego County. That was 15-20 years ago, but we stopped using that.
All right, so we're gonna do a site visit. And
Let me know the date.
I'll give you a bunch of dates. We'll do a site visit.
Okay.
The initial, feeling on the part of some of the board members is too close to the apartments, so you're gonna have to have some flexibility.
We'll talk about it.
That's called flexibility.
We'll talk about
And
it.
you got a 22-acre site.
Yeah, I know, but I don't control it. The property owner controls it. And so we'll talk to him. Or whoever.
You'll talk to him.
Someone will. Do we,
Dave,
I'm sorry, are we gonna set a date for the balloon test? Though? I didn't mean to cut you off. That, what, no one mentioned a date for a balloon
I
test.
assume you with Matt will figure that out, right?
We can, we just need to figure out a date with the notice. I'll.
Also, is there, beyond that, is there a need for a written protocol for them, and do we know what we're doing?
I mean, we typically don't provide a written protocol, but it's pretty standardized, but we're gonna do a typical balloon
Okay.
test, obviously with the 3, 6 or whatever it was.
So you guys will just take notes and you'll be all set. You need a date.
I could pick a date. I was looking at the calendar. I think you're looking at the earliest is mid-March with a 10-day notice.
well, you can pick a date, but you also have to give us the verbiage for the public, notices, right?
Yeah, I was gonna say I can send it over to Dave. That's
So if
not
you're
a
gonna do the
problem.
middle of March, we're almost there now. It's 2.5 weeks to the middle of March, 3 weeks to the middle.
What
of
do we have,
March.
10 day, we have 10-day notice?
You have 10-day
Yeah.
notice.
Okay.
So we need to see what that notice is gonna look like.
Yeah.
Okay, fine. So Matt, you and, these guys. will
I
work
don't
on-
know that I need to be involved in that. It's really at the convenience of the board. If there's any particular date that a significant number of board members who want to.
I don't know of any
attend.
holidays that are coming up except for St. Patrick's Day.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah, I would defer to the board.
So we're driving around.
so would you be involved with him in terms of the date?
I
Or you know what?
would let the board speak to that. What's good for me is not
Dave-
necessarily good for the board.
Dave Church will work on it with, thanks, man. That's all right.
Okay,
Dave Church will
We'll
do that.
figure out public notice. So,
That's really important. I don't want to, we can't,
okay,
if we don't give enough public notice, we gotta push the date back.
You know, I understand, but like you said, we're already barely making mid-March. And you could lose a month because of weather,
Because of the
and I just wanna do the best I can to get the
So,
leaf off
Is
condition.
it possible we could just say we're going to attempt, where the first attempt will be on this date? And we will continue every Saturday after
Yeah, I'll
until
write,
such time?
I'll write the
You
notice
guys
up,
put
that's
it
gonna
in,
be.
you put in writing what you're proposing.
Yeah.
At this hour of the night, I'm not verbally, what you said, I just forgot. So put it in writing and then we'll.
Yeah, I'll draft it,
Just
send it to-
notice.
It just gets bumped a week,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
In a week,
essentially.
in a week.
Because of that, exactly, if it's not
Because it's-
gonna
that-
happen on
since it
that
has to be on
Monday, it'll be
If you
next
want to
Friday.
get Saturday, Sunday, Friday, one day, that's we done one of those 2
Right.
days, and then Saturday,
Saturday,
Sunday.
and
Does it
Saturday,
make sense
Sunday.
to say Friday, if not Friday, Monday, if not Monday, the following Friday?
Yeah, it's gonna be
You say
confusing.
Saturday.
That will be confusing.
But I'll try to do
Yeah,
something.
we'll figure something
I'll
out.
probably try to put it, we're gonna do it on Friday and then Saturday, weather permitting. And if not, it would be Monday and then Saturday, weather permitting, right? Because it has to be a Friday and or Monday or a Saturday or something.
Or just say.
Yeah.
Okay, good. Dave,
All right,
we haven't heard from you.
so just some protocol stuff. Rick asked me to send the applicant a memo working from what Helena and Peter came up with. That was sent a week ago today. A first request was there's a series of comments we had collectively on the original application packet, right?
Yeah.
Fix some titles.
Yeah.
Explain what some of these red ovals were on the
Yes,
map.
right. Yep.
Et cetera, et cetera. You updated the EAF. Some other items. Second, they got Peter's spreadsheet. That Helena worked on
Yep.
with the viewpoints, which is gonna be called. So they've had that. And we're acknowledging some of these sites are pretty hard to access. I don't know. When you talk to Minnewaska, you're gonna have to figure out, somebody's got to figure out how to get to these places, some of these
Right.
places.
I think
mean-
that's achievable, I think. that-
We'll get it.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
mean,
Yeah.
I've seen 3 feet of snow in mid-March.
Right.
And skied on it in Minnewaska, so we'll have to see how they get there. I don't know. If what Matt's gotta go to or one of your colleagues, but some of these sites are an hour hike in and
That's-
might be a foot of snow.
That's one of the reasons why we were requesting assistance with that, because typically we only have one, maybe two people out taking photos on our end. And that's usually several hours of us just driving from spot to spot.
So it may be
That's
difficult, but we'll accomplish it.
Yeah, but I think
Yeah.
Minnewaska will probably help.
Yes, they have a tracked vehicle that,
Uh,
and they want.
Third, I confirmed it on the visual impact, the protocol is you work with Matt
Yeah.
on behalf of the board, right,
Yes.
which you've been doing. We requested that certain key interest parties stay informed. They're not gonna be part of the seeker interested parties list, as well as the visual impact, notification. That's Palisades Park Commission, I gave them a contact and an address and full contact information. Minnewaska State Park Preserve, which is a unit of Palisades Park, but they're gonna be treated separately. New York State DOT Office of the Environment, which handles the scenic byway program. You've got a contact and Matt's got these, and the Shanga Mountain Scenic Byway Regional Partnership. Which Aaron, your town supervisor, has agreed to be the ERSAT's leader of. Since the partnership has not met and multiple years and its membership is over half of whom have lapsed, so. It's unclear locally how organized it is.
Greatest impact is gonna be on the town of Rochester, so. the
Right,
town of
right.
Rochester
It's just,
supervisor-
it's unfortunate the DOT. Deferred to the local partnership group and the local partnership group isn't functional. So.
One rule world.
So we've just got to deal with that, with the practical reality. We also asked for any clarity if there's anything proprietary or sensitive in the application. Since Peter's working with folks to get the stuff posted.
There's not,
There's nothing?
whatever we submitted to you in this book and whatever I submit to you, unless I say this is proprietary, and I do not anticipate that happening, is available to the public.
Which included the sites, the alternative sites you looked at.
Absolutely, yep.
So, just a quick on so the town has a distinct wireless telecommunications facility code, 14029. It clearly provides purpose and intent to minimize adverse aesthetic and visual impacts amongst others. So you're at firm ground, not only in your town code, but of course through seeker. It is a type D facility. If you start looking at that, don't get confused. There's 4 different, I'm speaking of the board members. There's 4 different types of facilities. This is a type D, which is
the most.
it's the one category for a new facility. The others are mostly additions to existing co-locations. There are clear standards for height. The basic issue, which you talked about, is cannot exceed tree line plus 50 feet or 150 feet total. However, they've asked for, and you can grant a waiver to that, to be determined after this analysis if the waiver is necessary or not, right? That code's got regulations on
So the
setback.
waiver that we're applying, that they would be applying for, and asking for.
They already have applied.
Well, they've asked us to do it, not to the CBA.
No, the code says the planning board can provide a waiver for height.
Okay,
They don't have to go to the ZBA.
okay. So the waiver would be the 50 feet above what the code provides for,
And the code provides tree line plus 50 feet.
plus 50 and tree line.
Or 150.
Which is, but that doesn't apply.
That doesn't apply.
No, we're asking for the waiver. You can't grant the waiver for a tower taller than 150 feet. We're asking you to grant the waiver up to 150 feet, well, for 145.
Right.
But because of the need, and I think the code says if you demonstrate it's needed.
But the point is effectively, it's a 50-foot waiver on a 95-foot rule. So it's, in variance terms, if you were having a conversation with CBA, it's a fully 50% variance on the height. So it's a significant deviation, but then again, as I said, it's not unusual to have things like this happen on cell tower codes because sometimes they're drafted in a vacuum. But we should still take it as something that's quite significant that we're going to need to look at in our secret review, make sure that it's necessary and make sure that it's, in terms of a variance, the minimum necessary, that sort of thing.
So let me just ask a legal question about that. Do we need to have an agreed upon set of criteria that we're going to use in order to come up with this?
No, it's under the code, and the code does, I have to go back and look at it. I don't think the code has particular criteria.
It doesn't.
Yeah, so
that's
it's a, this is a very significant deviation that the board has discretion over, but there's very little criteria. So what I'm suggesting is that as analog, we sort of adopt the variance criteria for an area variance, which is exactly what the ZBA would have done, and otherwise just provide a seeker review, which is that, we're going to try to minimize adverse impacts, and we're going to try to make sure this is necessary under the Telecommunications Act. This is necessary. There's going to be an accommodation for it, and so we've got to, take a hard look to make sure that that we're minimizing the negative attributes from this thing.
So can you develop, Dave, for us, when we get to the point where we have to grant this waiver?
Set of alternative criteria?
What are the criteria to make sure that if we meet it, great. If we don't meet it,
I can do it now, or maybe better
In
take a
writing.
look at the
at some point in writing,
let's take a look at the balloon test and see what comes out of it. But yeah, it's going to be
and reflecting what the zoning board would normally.
it's going to be based on seeker and the ZBA criteria as applied to this particular project, and it's a significant.
Because I don't want to sit here and just say, well, oh, what are the criteria for the waiver? I want to know, we all want
There is none.
well, you're going to develop some.
Well. And the applicant may have their own opinion as to whether we've come up with the right set of criteria. And
That's
whether
fair,
they,
that's fair.
As opposed to
Always thought
bounding in the
something.
dark. Yeah.
Dave, sorry, go ahead.
The code, this section of the code's got, allows you, there's certain regulations that they're limited, but you can look at setback, color, lighting, security, signage, utilities, and roadway arrangements in the site plan. I think we will have to fairly soon talk about the site plan requirements. I think previously we talked about the structural certification study that's required, and it's not timely right now, right? even though the code represents we should have gotten it already,
Right.
it doesn't make any sense to get it yet.
It doesn't, I mean, like I said, it doesn't exist because you can't have a structural analysis for a tower that doesn't exist.
Right.
Correct.
There are some provisions, I'm just gonna use one example, the site plan is supposed to show all zone radius.
Okay.
I didn't see that anywhere.
Yep, yeah, we can. we
I'm
can
gonna
certainly show that.
itemize, if Rick, it's okay, I'll just itemize some of these
Yeah.
things. Okay,
On that, I don't want to take up a ton of your time, because I probably had the longest drive home. But we can actually build the tower with, they call it a hinge point, a break point in there, so if there's a concern about proximity to the apartment complex, even though we are far enough away, we can design it so that basically over-design the bottom, so that's the strong part, and then if it were to fail, which I say they don't fail, but it would kind of collapse on itself, we can show you that.
right, okay. Well, I'll itemize some things that to complete the site plan, if that's straightforward, Rick. I'm
Yeah,
just
and
using
Greg-
that as an example.
Yeah, and Greg Bowler, you should, I think it's going
Okay.
to have Greg do his normal site plan review.
Yes,
So if you
okay,
could contact him for that.
sure, no problem.
All right, Greg Bowler is our engineer.
He was here last time.
Yes,
Can I ask a question?
go ahead,
about
Jennifer.
Review, and I think we touched on it, but maybe I missed it. Do we also need to send this to SHPO? Make sure that we check that box.
Well. Your 106, there's been reference that the 106 review is done by SHPO. I'm not sure that's true. Having previously run a consulting firm that did a lot of that work, that's a federal function.
Yeah, but there,
It may be coordinated with SHPO, but if you read the newspaper lately, who's gonna do this, right? I mean, did they just let go half their staff?
SHPO or the Fed
Or the feds?
so the way
it's-
it works, if I
The
can clarify.
code, just so the code, for better or worse, the code language in the town code says that the NEPA and the 106 review is required to complete the application. And you're in process, right?
Correct. The way it works is because we are we're licensed by the federal government, we have broadcast licenses to basically shoot waves into the air. And we have to comply with a bunch of federal laws, including NEPA. However, no one at the federal government completes NEPA. It is simply, we complete NEPA, we have it in our files in case we ever get audited. We have to make sure we have it for every single site. There are some intermunicipal agreements between the feds and SHPO and Indian tribes so that the SHPO will get involved with this, not through the normal CRIS process, but they get involved and they will send a letter concurring or not concurring once they see these. So we're in process of that. They've been notified and they will see photo sets.
SHPO was notified?
SHPO will be, yes, because they were notified through the 106 process that
Right.
got botched up.
Are we?
So to her question, will the 106 process satisfy the board's interest in having SHPO sign off of this?
I'm anticipating I will provide you with a SHPO concurrence email.
Okay.
It is going to be tiny. You're gonna look at it and say, what is this? But that's the way they do
No,
it.
I'm
Okay.
less concerned that SHPO have major concerns, because I think we probably are covering our bases here. It's more about making sure that for the purposes of SECRA, we have all of the approvals that are required with a coordinated review.
Yes, and
Yeah.
so as part of that NEPA review, they reach out to DEC. So if
Right.
there's the Indiana, whatever, bat,
Indiana.
bat.
Yeah.
So yeah, so we'll probably have a tree clearing restriction that we can only clear trees during 6 months or whatever of the
That's
year.
DEC.
Sure, but what I'm trying to say is that for your seeker review, you'll have that information, which you'll need. This and then the NEPA reaches out to SHPO, so you'll have that for what you need also.
So Scott, on the issue of the 106 and the guys from Texas who were doing all this work, you rewrote the public notice. Is that going into the newspapers soon?
It can, but I think the last correspondence I had from you, you said that Mr. Church was gonna review and provide and confirm if it was okay. Unless I missed that.
Did I send it to you? Scott rewrote.
No,
the
you
notice.
told me that they agreed to, I didn't. The notice with the whoever the Towers LLC is, was in the public newspapers this week.
All right, so I will give you what Scott rewrote.
Yeah,
I'll give it to you and to Dave. Just let
You
me,
want it reposted?
he's gonna repost it to all three.
three newspapers, I think you gave me those newspapers.
I gave you the newspaper names.
I clarified the
Okay,
names, I thought this, I
The
looked at it
reason
and
for
said,
that,
this is the easiest way to handle it, let's just redo it.
the reason for it is that they advertised as the Towers LLC.
I know,
Nobody knows who the Towers LLC is, so Scott rewrote the whole thing.
okay,
Maybe I didn't send it to you and Dave, probably didn't. If you guys could look at it, they will repost it in the three newspapers.
Yeah.
Shawangunk, Bluestone, and what's the week, the Daily,
The Freeman.
Daily Freeman.
Yeah,
So I
once
do
we
all
get that,
three.
we'll post it, because it's part of the one,
Okay.
part of the need for review that we have.
Okay. that's all for now.
Okay, anybody else? Is everybody fried as I am?
Yeah, let's wrap this up.
Okay.
It's early.
There's always, we have to have a single person that always makes the motion to adjourn. Who wants to be that person? Helena, you want to be that person?
I make the motion that we adjourn.
And everybody second it?
But actually, there was one more topic on the agenda that we have not.
What was that?
Other matter.
Oh, yeah.
I don't have the minutes.
Why is it on the?
Yes.
Because I thought I would-
Proposed changes to the code regarding all.
You have a lot of
Planning board member and chair.
You're right. It's too late.
Oh, thank you.
Goodbye.
Too late. All right, so Helena made the motion. Who made the second?
Second.
Dave made the second. All in favor?
Aye,
Thank you, guys.
thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Have a nice evening.
Oh,
Yes.
on the site plan,
Yeah.
did I send it now or did I leave?
Wait.
Okay.